Hello folks and welcome to our game with myself, Shane Stapleton, as always joined by Michael Verney and brought to you by OurGaretro.com. Use the promo code OurGAme and you'll get 15% off. There's a huge amount of items on their website there, including this jumper here. The old Bonnish Store jerseys are around, as are the zip-up tops that you have there, Michael. Anything strange from the weekend?
No, Jimmy Barry comes immediately to mind when you think of that top, doesn't he?
Yeah, she's an absolute beaut. She really is.
Yeah.
You were around the grounds over the weekend. We're going to talk about that. Look, we've both been watching games left, right and centre across the country. We're going to have John Maughan on the show as well. And we're also going to have Claire Coffey of Nafina on the show. But I suppose the first place to go is Mark Coleman. And he suffered a suspected broken jaw. I was looking at some details on the Cork Echo, and Dennis Hurley was writing about it. He was saying it happened in that training camp at Dingle last weekend. Obviously, he missed all of last year with a knee injury, and he's been looking good since returning a couple of the games that we've seen him in. But if he's got a broken jaw now, that really does put him under pressure to, I suppose, the first round of the championship is just it's coming so soon down the tracks. How much are we going to see of him this year, if at all?
Yeah, puts him under big pressure. Ben McCormick suffered a similar injury for Kildare against Meath last week, and his championship is probably in doubt for the Kildare footballers. So you'd have to say with Mark Coleman, he's in big doubt because there's no contact that he can go into until that is completely healed, and you don't know how that will react to when you do go into contact as well. So it was only just after getting him back, and you're kind of thinking, here's a fella that can add a bit, even more energy to Cork, and obviously a beautiful ball player, one of the best in the country. But you'd have to say, they were finished before the end of May last year, even the second last weekend of May was it last year. Even if they progress out of Munster, he's still going to be under pressure, and it's a matter of, I've never, thankfully, touch wood, I've never had that injury, but imagine how cautious you would be going back into contact even with it, and how careful you'd have to be to make sure that something doesn't reoccur. So that's a big loss after just getting him back and thinking, okay, we're going to make a place for this at 7 probably. He's probably gone out the door again, and they're thinking without him again, unfortunately.
I think your microphone might be dragging slightly off your collar there on your right hand side, but look, I totally agree. And you even wonder over the next number of months, how well can you eat? If you've a broken jaw, a lot of the time you're seeing that people aren't eating full solids. So do you actually get in the same amount of food that you ordinarily would do? Are you going to lose muscle mass? Can you, do as much gym? Fair enough, you have a broken jaw, but can you kind of be grimacing and doing a chest press or whatever it might be? You just wonder how much does it affect you physically, never mind the actual injury itself.
It's gas. I remember chatting to Sean Flanagan, the jockey, broke his jaw, and he said it's gas the way jockeys think and the mentality. It was actually a plus that he couldn't eat properly, because there was no way he was going to be able to put on weight or anything like that. That'd be the jockey's biggest worry, that they put on weight because they're not really working it off or whatever. But that's a different mentality. You would struggle, you'd imagine, in the early couple of weeks, that injury as a hurler or a sportsman that needs to replenish or whatever to get the normal food in. A lot of it you'd imagine would probably have to be pureed. Hopefully it's not as bad as what has been said. But
well, to be fair, Owen Cormacan was writing in the Examiner that it's not supposed to be as bad as initially thought. But and there's some talk that he could be available for the Championship opener, which is away at Waterford on the 21st of April. But still, you're wondering, if this is an injury to the teeth and jaw and stuff like that. Look, maybe we're totally wrong, and he will be fine. But God, it's a race against time, and when you've missed a full season, it's just not ideal.
Yeah, you know what it's like as well. You just want to be training. You don't want to miss a training session. You don't want to miss any games, any in-house games. You just mentally, you feel so much better going into matches, knowing that you have that kind of body of work done. Whereas if you've missed a couple of sessions, I don't know if you've ever been in this position, but where you've had to maybe rush back or whatever, there's certain runs that you can't make, or you have to kind of nearly half mind yourself in a match because you're thinking of the bigger picture. You're thinking of, if I go full bore here, I mightn't be ready to go again in 2 minutes like my opponent will be, because I just don't have the mileage put into the legs or whatever. Listen, hopefully he's available for Munster, which you definitely say he's under a bit of pressure now, and he's not going to be, 100% match fit. And we've seen how cutthroat Munster is. You cannot be even an inch off your best. You have to be delivering your best nearly every day. You'd be hoping from Pat Ryan's point of view and Cork's point of view that he's able to feature some way anyway.
Yeah, okay. We're going to do a SWOT analysis of the teams in the Leinster Championship. We did the Munster one last week, and you can go onto the YouTube channel there and watch that back. Let us know what you think. So again, I'll get you to explain to people what is a SWOT analysis.
Yeah, no, it's, a lot of businesses would just do it to try and progress or identify problems, but S is the strengths, W is the weaknesses, O is the opportunities, and T is the threats. So when we went through Limerick, there weren't too many weaknesses, and potentially there weren't too many threats. But when you go through the rest of the kind of chase and pack, there's probably a couple of different facets to go into each area. We'd start off with Kilkenny, All-Ireland finalists last year, and their strengths. I would say, one of their main strengths is anyways that you have a fair idea, barring the last maybe 35-40 minutes of the 2019 All-Ireland final, and maybe a couple of appearances against Wexford. You have a fair idea what you're going to get most days, and they're going to perform to a level most days. And I'd say that definitely is a strength. They rarely throw in, a really, really off-colour performance when it's needed. So I would say that's definitely a strength. What are you looking at as strengths? I'd say the form of Owen Cody and Adrian Mullen as well, and the potential for them to be leaders of this next generation of Kilkenny team, I'd say is a big strength too.
Would you include the All-Ireland final last year and the All-Ireland semi-final they had during COVID when they were 10 points up in Waterford and fell away? Would you include those?
I said generally you have a fair idea what you're going to get on a given day. I don't think it was a complete collapse against Limerick last year. I think Limerick went through the gears, but I would say that's generally you have a fair idea. Like, you can't say the same about Galway, can't say the same about Cork, can't say the same about Waterford. There's a good few teams there that you can't say that about. You have a fair idea what you're going to get from them most days.
Yeah, and I also say one of the strengths is how dominant they are in Leinster. They've won, is it 3 in a row now, or
Four.
4 in a row now? So they've very much got the rest of the province under their heel, which is going to set them up for the All-Ireland semi-final, or it has done in recent years. And then they've come into it and they've performed. To be fair, in the All-Ireland semi-finals, they really have performed very well.
That's a strength as well, Shane. Being in Leinster is a strength. It's a massive strength.
And look, as a Leinster man, I suppose you're able to speak with a bit more authority on that. But I think the strength is, probably their performances in Leinster that sets them up for that run at the All-Ireland. They come in, they've probably had, a nice little break in sort of like, they have a tough game, a bit more of a manageable game. They can sort of rest players, they can use their squad a little bit. And then once they hit Croke Park, and by the way, they've already had a few games at Croke Park because of the way Leinster is. They hit Croke Park for an All-Ireland semi-final. They've given everyone a bit of game time. They've been able to rest lads if they've needed to. They've already got Croke Park experience that season. So emotionally, they should be in the right spot when they play an All-Ireland semi-final. They deliver. And then to be fair, I would say that they've delivered what they can deliver in the last 2 All-Ireland semi-finals. They got really, really close in 2022. Could have won that game. Puck of a ball. Obviously, you see Limerick at the very end. They're kind of hanging on to some degree. And then last year, I think probably losing by 9 points, they still probably got as much as they could out of themselves in that performance. So they're delivering.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. When you look at weaknesses, I would definitely say, like, I don't know, midfield has been an interchangeable feast for the last 5 years, I'd say, nearly. You have no idea really who's going to be playing middle of the field, and it's so important nowadays. And I'm not just talking about lads getting up and down, just that kind of link with their defence, obviously link with the attack as well, but been really defensively solid. Like Limerick, you have O'Donovan and O'Donoghue, they're as good defensively as they are going forward. They're just so good at plug and hole, so good at covering for defence. Kilkenny, you don't really know who's going to be playing midfield. It could be Conor Fogarty, it could be Adrian Mullen, it could be Cian Kenny, John Donnelly could be out around the middle of the field. It could be, Conor Brown's not involved at the minute. It could be him. Mikey Carey could be out around the middle of the field. They do not have a settled pair in there, and it's definitely, I would say, one area of big, big worry and a glaring weakness, I would say, in Kilkenny at the minute.
Okay. No, that is an interesting one. And finding midfield players is a tough one. It's, as tough a position as there is. And then also now with the way the middle area of the pitch is probably filled with up to 18 to 20 players, sometimes you can say, that midfielder didn't get into it. Well, he's surrounded by so much traffic. Whereas if you're a half back, there tends to be a bit of space to get on ball behind you. Not always, but there's a bit more handy ball to be won. The other thing I'd say is, right, they've had that underage success. They won the All-Ireland under-20 title a couple of years ago. But I just don't know if they've got obvious lads to step in as senior stars straight away. So I would say possibly the weakness is they're going to still be relying, obviously TJ Reid is still one of the best players in the country, but they're going to be relying on him again this year, and they're going to want to leave him on for 75 plus minutes. There isn't very obviously underage stars coming through. Now, at this stage, Owen Cody and Adrian Mullen, who've collected Young Hurler of the Year titles between them, they're totally established and they're brilliant players. But I just don't, like, have we seen, who's the next generation? There's no obvious next generation that's going to set the tone this year.
No, I would totally agree. Cody and Mullen are well established the last 3 or 4 years. I would say, as you were talking there, my point I was going to make, I would say, and maybe it's harsh, that there seems to be an absence of class coming through, or an absence of star power coming through. And that would be a big, big worry, because TJ is going out the door over the next couple of years. That's obviously a gaping hole that they're going to have to fill. Maybe Mullen or Cody will take on that mantle, but who's going to take on their mantle then? Are there obvious kind of, you know what I mean? Like, are there obvious players to come in there? I don't know if there are. You know, they won another 20 All-Ireland. Billy Drennan was probably the star turn in the final. You know, maybe hasn't developed into that senior star yet. Now, there's still plenty of time there. He was under 20 last year. There's still plenty of time. But there's no obvious class angle, shall we say. There's a lot of good players, but like when I was growing up, it was, you know, Richie Power was the next big thing. Cha Fitz was the next big thing. Richie Hogan was the next big thing. TJ burst on the scene nearly in even a Leinster Colleges final, All-Ireland Colleges final. He was the next big thing. Paddy Hogan was even around there. You had a couple of the Prendergast as well. That, you know, you had a lot of players that you're thinking they're the next big thing. You know, we're struggling probably to say that in Kilkenny at the minute. It's a different player nearly every month. Do you know what I mean? 1 month it's Billy Drennan, 1 month it's Harry Shine, next month it's somebody else. So I don't think there's any, you know, really, really obvious, real top end stars coming through at the minute. Now, that might be proven to be false in a couple of years, but at this moment in time, you'd say there's no lads waiting and primed to come into the senior team and make a big splash.
Yeah, so like, get your comments in. Are we right? Are we wrong? Do you agree, disagree? Joe Butler, with a fully fit Adrian Mullen, Kilkenny are a different force. That ability to score from 50 to 60 metres is a rare skill with all teams. Adrian has that ability for sure. I agree with that. Adrian McGrath says, Kilkenny's strength is belief that they're going to win, which sustains effort on the fringes when things are not going well. If belief drops and 1 or 2 drop work, you can go from 5 to 10 down in minutes. So opportunity then?
Well, the fact, as I mentioned about being in Leinster is a massive opportunity that Tip, Cork, Limerick, Waterford don't have that same opportunity. They have to basically, you know, kill to get to the position that Kilkenny have been in. So it is a glorious opportunity that, you know, if Kilkenny can get to a Leinster final, which you'd expect them to do, and if they're able to win a Leinster final, they're, you know, 140 minutes away from winning All Ireland. Do you know what I mean? That being in Leinster is a massive, massive opportunity that would say at the minute that a lot of other counties don't have that same luxury. So I would say that's a massive opportunity. It's also the fact that they're, you know, if Limerick are to win Munster as well and Kilkenny win Leinster, as they have the last couple of years, they're avoiding them until that final stage. Maybe they need to play them in a semi-final, maybe like they did in 19. But you would say it's an opportunity that's there. It's a matter of grasping it each year.
Do you know, you could nearly say for every Leinster team then their opportunity is that they are in Leinster, because it does lead, there are a couple of gaps there in terms of, like, if you're Dublin, you're like, okay, well, you know, and you could say the same for Wexford. Well, thank God we're not in Munster here, because we actually do, it's probably a 2-team shootout for that third position to get through. And if you're at the bottom end of it, you're like, okay, well, look, there's a couple of teams here that are going to be in the mix for getting relegated. We're not necessarily going to go down because of that. So is it a small bit of a cop-out if we choose that being in Leinster is your opportunity?
I wouldn't use it. I wouldn't use it for them all. I just think for a team like Kilkenny, like, it is like Limerick could be out of the championship before Kilkenny have to play them. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, Kilkenny could win an All Ireland without having to play Limerick, or Limerick could be out of competition. If they are out of competition, it's by virtue of the 4 teams in Munster knocking them out of competition. So they could be still standing on the other side when, would say, the 5 in Munster could have a hell of a lot taken out of each other, and the 3 that are left, potentially with Limerick gone, could sleepwalk into a semi-final or final against Kilkenny. So I wouldn't use it for all the teams. I just think with Kilkenny, you know, they're going to be in an All-Ireland quarter-final minimum by virtue of being in Leinster. You'd imagine anyway.
Yeah, well, I'll just very quickly give you their route through Leinster this year. Round 1, the 21st of April. That's going to be at home to Antrim. So that's a win. Next game out then is the 28th of April. That's away to Galway. That could go either way. It could be shadow boxing like we saw last year. Round 3 then is going to see them on the 11th away to Carlow. Look, let's call a spade a spade. That's going to be a win. Then they've got a trip to Dublin on the 18th. And then on the 26th of May, they've got Wexford at home. So it's balanced out really nicely. Tough game, relatively easy game. Use your squad. So look, let's get a comment in here from GA for Life. Such nonsense comments. Who've won the colleges, schools, All Ireland? Kilkenny will always have hurlers coming. How many people thought Mikey Butler would get young hurler of the year? Probably no one. I'm guessing he's supposed to say we will be fine. Okay, that's fair enough. But like when you go into these competitions, is it not like Kilkenny CBS go in and Kieran's go in and it's kind of take your pick from the Kilkenny under-20 team? So those teams are stacked.
Yeah, well, like people that are working in Kieran's or involved with Kieran's mightn't thank me for it, but some people in Kilkenny would suggest that Kieran's taking in as many players as they are from, a massive amount of clubs. It's nearly more like not a development squad, like an academy, or do you know what I mean? Everybody's going in there. That mightn't necessarily be a good thing, really. That's what people on the ground in Kilkenny.
It's great for Kieran.
Anecdotally tell me it's great for Kieran's and they're in another All-Ireland final, but it's not necessarily good for Kilkenny as a whole, shall we say, because all those All-Irelands that they've won and competing at that level, it definitely hasn't transferred across, you would say, to their minor teams in the last, 7-8 years are we talking? They haven't won a minor since 14, am I right in saying? Was it when John Walsh went to town on Sean Finn, the last time he was seriously struggled in the game, I'd say. But it hasn't correlated to Kilkenny minor teams for the last good while, for whatever reason. Okay,
and then the threat for Kilkenny. Keep getting the comments in, folks.
The threat.
I'd say an injury to one key player. Let's say TJ Reid is out for whatever reason. You just wonder where they go from there.
You would say that's a big threat, even as regards who steps up and takes the frees. Like Owen Cody, I would say, is a brilliant player, but he's not a natural free taker. Did they play Billy Drennan mostly for the frees? I don't know. I don't know if they do. I don't think they can afford to be missing a big man like that. Saying that too, like I'd say I don't think they could afford to be missing like a Hugh Lawler or someone like that either. Like I'd say probably Hugh Lawler and TJ are two players that they and probably Edger Mullen that they cannot do without. Particularly, I would say probably Lawler and Reid in particular. Who would fill that gap at the edge of the square for Kilkenny, having a fella that can go toe to toe, and then you have TJ at the other end. I think even psychologically, if he was missing or had to go off in a game, it would have nearly that same effect as Henry going off back in the day.
Okay, Galway strength.
Well, like when you put their squad down on paper, you're kind of thinking, like, I'm just off the top of my head, Dottie Burke, Cottle Mannion, Pádraig Mannion, Tom Monaghan, Conor Cooney, David Burke, who else? Ronan Glennon, Brian Kincannon. Kevin Cooney's injured at the minute, but he's still there. Joe Cooney, and you're still thinking there are 8 or 9 of definitely some of the better players in the country. They still have, and I haven't named a heap of talent there. Their squad is very, very strong. Throwing Keenan Fahy, Derek Fahy in there as well, Aina Murphy, Jack Grealish. Who else are we talking here? There's plenty more. Like on paper, you would say that they have one of the better squads that are out there.
Yeah, look, they do have a lot of talent, and yeah, so I don't think that's for question. Then the weakness, I would say, a potential weakness I talked about in the last week or two was, physically, are they going to be as strong as they have been in recent years? We've seen, like, when they're trying to bring through some of these new young players who are quite talented, the size profile is very, very different from the team that Micheál Donoghue and just afterwards had. So I'm just wondering if, Galway always like to be a team that's able to mix it up with you physically. If they try and do that this year, do they have the personnel suited to it? And if they're going to maintain some of the personnel who do give them that, are those players a little bit long in the tooth to play them all together? Something I would have said about Tipperary in recent years, playing too many of them together. So is the weakness that they might actually have to change style on the hoof a little bit, and maybe they are doing that, to be fair. But yeah, I just wonder, is that an issue?
Yeah, you've often said it. They're not the land of the giants anymore. Looking at the size profile, there's a lot more lads around 5'10" or 5'11" now. So I don't think they can play that same style maybe that they did in 2017 or 18. Their weakness for me would be an easy one. It's just unpredictability, that you just are not sure on a given day what you're going to get. With Donoghue from 16 to 19, generally you knew every day what you were going to get out of Galway. I don't think there was a bad performance or a real up and down thrown in from 16 to 19. I know Dublin beat them in Parnell, but they didn't not show up that day. They still performed to 11. Dublin just performed much better on that day. Then under Shane O'Neill in 20, it was consistent enough. Then in 21, Dublin beat them in Croke Park. They were atrocious against Waterford for a half in Thurles. And it's been very, very up and down. I'm thinking the Leinster final in 22 was terrible against Kilkenny. There were times last year where they mixed, the brilliant with the, woeful, you'd have to say. So, and even already this year against Tip, switching off at different times in games, it's just you're not 100% sure what you're going to get on a given day with them. If it hits and they're on fire, they'll be very, very hard beaten by anybody. If they perform to the level they have at times, they could nearly be beaten by anybody.
Yeah, so the opportunity this year is that they've still got some of those key players who won it back in 2017. So David Burke is still there, Conor Cooney, Dahi Burke, you can name several other players. So they have all of those lads still there to help get them over the line in big days. I'm just also wondering, is this the year that Jason Flynn, and he's always shown that he's got quality, does he catch fire this year? He's 29, he's the perfect age. Will the team finally be named to make him the fulcrum of the attack? And he, along with Brian Kincannon, Conor Whelan, Evan Nyland, who's probably really laid down a marker this year, Conor Cooney, if he's starting, Kevin Cooney, if hopefully he's back fit and available. Do they have a little balance where that will all help them across the line, that combination of, right, there's a couple of talents and a couple of lads just coming to the boil, while the older players are still able to offer something?
Yeah, I think Eamon O'Shea's influence is going to be fascinating there, because Lara and Jamie Callan would always say that he turned them kind of inside out and changed the way they played and made them kind of think a bit differently, and they both really flourished under him. It'd be fascinating to see if it does happen. Would it be a Jason Flynn, who has unbelievable potential, but it's kind of glimpses that we're seeing. It's not consistent brilliance that we're seeing. Maybe that will come out in him. Maybe Conor Whelan has been the fulcrum of their attack. Maybe they'll just, they've placed captaincy on his shoulders now as well. Maybe they'll just say, lads, we need to get him the ball as often as possible throughout a game and make him the fulcrum of the attack. There's an opportunity there, but the opportunity is also a bit, a potential weakness, because they're relying on some of the same players that they've relied on that probably haven't consistently delivered. And, some people would say as well, and I see some of the comments coming in there, that, that in 2 years under Henry, did we learn much about Galway? They were able to go toe-to-toe with Limerick at times, and then they, didn't deliver in one Leinster final, probably half threw away a Leinster final last year, and they're kind of going into this year now. They have to, just going on to the threats here, they have to win a Leinster this year, or there is a threat that this is all over. For this team, and many of those, like David Burke, Dottie Burke, Conor Cooney, Joseph Cooney, the clock is probably ticking on them, and there's a threat there this year that if they don't get silverware, that the chance may not be there for some of them again after 2024.
Yeah, and a couple of people have questioned, for example, Adrian McGrath here saying weakness, Henry Shefflin in charge, learning on the job. Look, he's done a lot of brilliant stuff, especially with Ballyhale, but yeah, people aren't going to be patient forever. We'll come back to Kilkenny Galway, I should say, in a little while. But delighted to say we've got John Maughan on the line here. John, how are things with you?
Good, Shane. Nice to talk to you.
And yourself. Enjoyable weekend of football. Plenty obviously happened, but did anything stick out more than any other game for you?
Yeah. Look at there was a great bounce back from Kerry in particular. I watched the performance yesterday. Very, very impressive. Dublin are certainly catching the eye. And of course, my home county, Mayo, obviously getting one over their old rivals, we were a little bit scared based on the performance of the previous weekend. Mayo were particularly poor against Tyrone, and Roscommon came in with a great bounce after a comprehensive victory over Monaghan. But the other one that caught my eye obviously was my old team Offaly. Huge scoreline, 5-15, I think, up against a Wicklow team that certainly has caught the eye as regards their underperformance in this year's campaign. But lots of football. Yeah, the standard has gone up in the last week or two. You can see now the big teams are beginning to mobilise their troops and get a bit of form. So we'll begin to see like the likes of Dublin and Kerry are really, really strong. Then in the lower divisions, Down have caught the eye, been very, very impressive. Donegal are getting victories, albeit in tight margins. But I think they were really pressed by Louth over the weekend. Armagh pressed by Fermanagh. But it's going along. The kind of the form that we would have anticipated, expected with 2 games to go is probably around where we would have expected, and the teams that we would anticipate being up there, they're there.
Yeah, for sure. Just did you notice in that win from Mayo against Roscommon, Aidan O'Shea scored a brilliant point off his right foot, and he just gave the whole yap back to, I suppose, a Roscommon player or whatever. I love seeing that sort of stuff.
A lot of talk down this way, Shane, about Aidan and whether his best days are behind him. He was dropped obviously for the previous game. I don't know, was that a punishment for maybe? I think he threw a bit of a strop when he was taken off the previous game, but that backfired because if you're chastising or reprimanding a player in that fashion, ideally you'd like to go on and pull out a victory. That didn't happen for Mayo against Tyrone. Aidan didn't get any game time. But he was obviously getting a bit of yap, maybe from the Roscommon crowd or maybe from his opponent, I don't know. But I think that was his first score from play, or first score perhaps in the opening 4 rounds of the National League. He hadn't played 3. A lot of talk whether he should start. Is he, is there a kind of a cameo role coming off the bench, something similar to Killian O'Connor? Both of them maybe falling into that category right now. And so lots of debate and discussion as to whether he should be starting or not. And in fact, I've had a conversation with lots of guys around the Mayo, and there's a little difference of opinion, but I think the majority are suggesting a role off the bench for Aidan.
And having been an inter-county manager for a long period of time, how do you, and we talked about this actually when we were talking about the Kilkenny hurlers, previously Tipperary hurlers and all that, how much do you have to balance things out in terms of okay, this lad is experienced, he'll keep his cool, he'll know what to do in a certain situation, versus I just need energy out there to make sure that we're not overrun? How much of a balance is that for Kevin McStay now with Killian and Aidan and so on?
Yeah, obviously it all depends on what the form or what the quality he has on his bench. And another one that's been underperforming this league is Tommy Conroy. Does he persevere with Tommy? He's obviously coming back from a long-term injury. Hasn't really fired in the Sigerson campaign or maybe for Mayo. But does he persevere with Tommy now in the last couple of games and trying to get him into a bit of form before he hits the championship? He knows what likes of Aidan O'Shea and Killian O'Connor can do, but it all depends. Fergal Boland, for argument's sake, a guy that didn't make the panel last year, he was cut from the panel last year. He's been an absolute revelation, and it's not just his own individual performance as regards kicking scores, but he's also bringing that forward line into play, and he's doing exceptionally well. He's been the real success for Mayo. His work persevering with Bob Tuohy. Jordan Flynn has underperformed a little bit, maybe a wing forward. I think he's a more orthodox midfielder. So there's a bit of tweaking to be done by Mayo Shame in the last couple of games. But I think Kevin this year has achieved what he wanted to achieve, and that was Division 1 status. I think that's almost secured right now with 6 points. And he can afford to go and have a bit of fun in the last 2 games and maybe have a look at maybe a couple of other players who are on the squad. But in fairness, I think most of them have got game time. So I think he's beginning to realise what he has. And it's a question maybe given the more game time to the younger lads like Bob Tuohy, Fergal Boland. I think he knows exactly what he's going to get from him now. Not too sure about one of the other 2 guys that have got game time. So I think he's beginning to realise what he has. And I think at this juncture, he might just experiment a little bit more for the last 2 games, knowing that he has secured Division 1 status.
John, is it any harm that, Kevin came in last year and everything was, brilliant, particularly throughout the league? Is it any harm that the likes of Aidan O'Shea is shown as, upset at coming off, that lads have a bit of a chip on their shoulder? Like, sometimes that's not necessarily a bad thing to have within a camp.
No, look at Michael. You could argue that. I mean, he's around the scene a long time. He's one of the more senior players with buckets of experience. I think you've got to show an example. The reality was, and he hasn't been playing brilliantly well. Like, I mean, we're not getting a scoring return from Aidan. That's been well documented over the last number of years. That's not his biggest attribute, is getting on the scoreboard. But I think it's just maybe his body language. He appeared, and I don't know for sure, but he appeared to be punished by leaving him out and not giving him any game time in the last game against Tyrone. I just think, I hear what you're saying, Michael. I don't necessarily agree. I can understand a player being disappointed. I think her body language is important, and certainly would appear it didn't sit well with the Mayo management, and it would appear that he was punished for maybe not having the right body language when he came off. I don't know, did he engage with the manager? Was there any high fives or shake hands? I'm not quite sure. A lot of managers don't engage with players now. Some do. I always made it a point if I've taken or substituting somebody that you go and have a chat with them or shake their hand. But it didn't happen in Aidan's case. But look, Michael, you have an opinion on it. I don't necessarily agree with what you just said there.
I don't think you'd last too long in the army with something like that, would you?
Well, put it this way. I mean, in my time, Spike Islander was always an option for a guy that. I know. Look, I can understand. I fully appreciate frustration, and and players certainly do get frustrated. But I just think in this case, Aidan wasn't playing particularly well. And I think many people commented to me, did you see his body language coming off? And I think he might have portrayed it a little bit better, particularly when you have young guys coming into the Mayo camp as we have this year.
John, I can't help but ask, just in terms of the army there, what's the toughest training exercise you had to do in the army?
The Glen of a Mall, we had a couple of stints in the Glen of a Mall. Our cadet school training was about maybe 17 months. We joined in November, and 42 of us joined my cadet class. The first couple of weeks were particularly tough. I was lucky enough that I had been to boarding school in Carlow College more, so being away from home and knowing how to look after myself reasonably well wasn't, from my point of view, it wasn't near as difficult from others who were leaving the bosom of their mammy and daddies and, coming when everything was they were looked after extremely well, depending on what part of the country you were from. But I was a country lad coming from across the line. I had come up reasonably the hard way, so to speak. But I remember going to Glen of a Mall. That was particularly tough. You were tested in every which way. And incidentally, I do recall looking for permission to go out and see the Hogan Cup final in 1981. And we were being presented with the Hogan Cup medal winners, winning medals from 1980. And I looked for permission to get out and come to the medal presentation, go home to Crossmine and play a match, and then go to the Hogan Cup final, which was Carlow College Motor playing Coleman to Clare Morris in Hyde Park and Roscommon. I was refused. Then I looked for permission to just come to the medal presentation. That was refused. I looked for permission to come and watch the Hogan final on the Sunday. That was all refused. But and on a Sunday afternoon, after you were prepared, you actually paraded down to Mass around 8 o'clock in the morning in the Curragh camp. And more or less around from 12 o'clock on, Sunday was free time where you literally crashed out and went to bed. You were so exhausted from the exertions of the previous week. But I rang up somebody that I knew quite well. I said, look, come and collect me outside the Curragh camp. I'll be hiding back at the corner around 12:30. Take me down to Hyde Park. I put on the balaclava, so to speak, and the collar of the coat up, and away I went. I came back the following that night, whatever time it was. I asked my classmates. I said, was anybody looking for us? Was anybody around? No, nobody had been. Look, you're safe enough, John. But the following morning, when we were out on parade, I got a call. Cadet Maughan falling outside the colonel's office, and they left me standing there for about an hour. Eventually, I was brought into a room. And the officer in charge looked at me in the eye. He said, look, we know your exact movements from 0800 hours yesterday until 20:59 last night. Tell us the truth and we might leave you here. tell us a lie, and you're going out the door. So don't answer me now. So they left me stewing there for about 45 minutes. I could see my colleagues, classmates, window. I felt like screaming, lads, help me out here. What should I do? So the officer came back in. He said, okay, cadet, tell us where you were. Or what did you do? I said, I was down in Hyde Park watching the Hogan Cup final. That's what we thought. Go down and hand in your uniform, pack your bags, and get outside the general's office. So I thought it was gone. Like, I mean, and to be absent, AWOL, absent without leave out of the cadet school was particularly harsh. But anyway, to make a long story short, I am making it long, incidentally. But yeah, they brought me in, and I realised I was sitting in front of the colonel in charge of the cadet school and two other officers. And I realised after 10 minutes of the bollocking that they weren't going to dismiss me. But I was dropped down to the bottom of the class. I was captain of the cadet school football team. They stripped that off me. I wasn't too worried about that. And I was kept in for about 16 weekends on the trot, where I didn't get out. And it was particularly harsh. But when I was leaving the Defence Forces in 1999, before I left, I met the officer that challenged me in his office about him knowing where I was. He said, John, we didn't know where you were, but we suspected you might have gone to Hyde Park. If you told a lie, there would have been no problem whatsoever. So that kind of stuff was part of the regime back there. But yeah, the Glenavon Mall, where you'd be sleeping out in trenches, and I never forget the midgets down the Glenavon Mall. Like, I mean, you couldn't make a cup of tea. We were out in the open cooking for ourselves out of what we're calling man packs. And that was particularly harsh, but you sucked it up and you got on it, and it was part of the regime, Shane. But good fun, I have to say. I spent 18 and a half years in the army, the Defence Forces, and I loved it. I really, really enjoyed it. The reason I left was security of tenure. I was involved in football. I had got involved in management with Mayo and what have you. And if you wanted a career in the Defence Forces, you had to go overseas, and you probably would have to spend a good chunk of your career up in the Curragh or the East or in Dublin. I didn't want that. I wanted to live in the west of Ireland, and so that's the reason I left.
And one other question: was there ever a time when you were stationed abroad and you just had a culture shock? Just, you know, you were going on duty elsewhere and you were just like, I'd never seen anything like this before.
No, I mean, obviously Lebanon was tough. Like, I mean, I played army football with a good friend. He was a young officer, Lieutenant Angus Murphy. And Angus was from Tuam, played football with Jarlath, and won an All-Ireland junior title with Galway, but played on the Army football team. And I had travelled away on a Defence Forces football trip with him to Australia. And he was a great guy, fine guy, engaged to be married, and 26 years of age, he was blown up. A landmine was set for him, and he was blown up. And I remember when I arrived in the Lebanon in 1988, and just about a year and a half after Angus had been killed tragically. I think it was the summer of '86 he was killed. I stand correct on that, but I think it was '86. And I arrived out in the hills of Lebanon. And while I was being brought down to the area of operations that I was going to be operating in, the officer there was that was returning, and he was handing over to me, said, that guy that's coming up there now in that Volvo car is the guy that was responsible for planting the bomb that killed Angus Murphy. Now that was a huge shock to me, and I have to say, I never forget that incident. And I was talking to, on my trip, the 64th Battalion, I was talking to a guy from Ballinrobe, Fintan Heenan. He was a corporal in the Defence Forces, and I happened to be out in his area on a Sunday night. And we were talking about Mayo football at that time, and on that particular occasion. And poor old Fintan was killed on the Monday morning with two others. So when you talk about a culture shock, you don't expect that to see that, but that's the reality of the Defence Forces working in a UN peacekeeping mission. There's always a chance of something like that happening. I watched, I think last week now, they had RTE cameras out in the Lebanon, and they're going through a particularly difficult time there because of the whole situation in neighbouring Israel, and we won't go into the politics of all that, but it's a difficult time within the Defence Forces, and we've lost quite a few out there, and unfortunately the trip I was on, there was 3 killed on the trip I was on, so that was hard, Shane. Like, I mean, particularly when you knew the guys, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely sounds that way. And obviously then it sounds a bit trite to go back talking football so swiftly after that, but I suppose we'll have to do that too. What did you make? Like, this stood out to me over the weekend. The amount of times that players tried to lob goalies who were out the field, and you see the goalkeeper obviously backpedaling or whatever. And I just wonder, you know, nobody scored from them. It will happen, obviously, but like in soccer, I think it's much easier to chip somebody with the ball on the ground and getting your foot under it and getting that bit of backspin. Whereas in Gaelic football, is it tougher, John, to lob a goalie? Like, because even the effort that Shane McGuigan had, I think that was going wide. David Hanlon did well, but it was going wide. Let's call a spade a spade.
It was, yeah.
And the Smiths one wasn't particularly brilliant, and he's a cultured footballer. Is it tougher in football with holding from the hand?
Well, that's a fair point. And like, I mean, obviously the ball is a little bit heavier as well than a soccer ball. But, and I don't know, does that make a difference? But it would do. When you're dropping the ball onto your boot, it's going to be, you lose a little element of accuracy. I know there's a lot of people that would love to see goalkeepers being chipped because it's one of these debatable questions when you talk about rule changes and in our game, particularly now with goalkeepers ending up as attackers. And, you know, very often you see a goalkeeper inside the 45. We see it every other weekend. So there's a lot of people out there would love to see goals being scored against the old traditionalists. Don't appreciate a goalkeeper coming off the line and being out the field so far. Look, it's part and parcel of the modern game, and I don't anticipate we'll see much of a change in it. But yeah, I'd love to see a few of them being chipped now and again, and it just might bring might bring them back to reality a little bit and park them as goalkeepers. But the reality is now, sorry about this, guys. There's no unless there's a rule change, we're going to see it happening. I think I recall in Croke Park a couple of years ago, Shane, was it the Lilies goalkeeper that was caught in the division? Yeah, I think it was the Lilies goalkeeper. I think he was a trendsetter. He was one of the first I saw back in the day coming out of, up
Graham Briody, was it? Yeah, Briody.
I think it was.
Yeah.
I think it was Michael. But I remember, I think it cost them, I think it might have been a Division 3 league final or 2 league final at the time. I can't recall exactly, but I remember saying, yeah, I'm delighted to see that. That's happy. That'll put a bit of manners on them. But no, look at, we've had a few efforts over the weekend. And as I say, it is what it is, Shane, and it'll probably remain that way, but let's hope we see a few goals being scored from it.
It happened actually in the Cork game as well. I think it was Mark Donlan was caught off the line and Brian O'Driscoll hit the crossbar and it went over. So it was one of the better efforts. But just on that, John, it's obviously a very kind of high-powered, high-ranking committee that's been set up with Jim Gavin kind of leading this potential rule changes. Like, where do you see those guys have, been at the coalface with, managing teams that have won All Ireland finals and played big games? Where do you see them actually falling as regards like realistic changes that they will make? I don't think they're going to rip up the script completely. Like, what type of things are maybe realistic that we might see change in football, or suggestions that they will make, or recommendations that they make?
Well, Michael, first of all, I've never heard as many people giving out about the spectacle of Gaelic football from an entertainment perspective. There's a lot of people talking and giving out, particularly about the mass defence and all that kind of stuff. Mickey Hart, on the other hand, thinks no rule changes whatsoever. The game is wonderful. So there is a debate to be had for sure. I mean, they're not going to appoint a committee ranking with those big appointments and those big names. They're going to certainly take a look at some rule changes. So what might there be? It's very difficult to know. There's lots of debate around, should we keep 4 of the 15 up inside the 45 at all times, and other, so that you don't have 15 behind the ball or 30 behind the ball, as the case may be. So that's certainly one. The mark is quite controversial. I think nobody is really, really in favour of the mark. I don't think it's achieved what it wanted to achieve as regards high fielding. Most of the marks are won down on the ground, if a couple of inches off the floor. So
do you like the kick-out mark, though?
Yeah, look, at the kick-out mark is fine, but we don't see. I'd love to know what percentage we're seeing, Shane, from kick-outs. I mean, what really impressed me over the weekend is trying to create space and players running onto a kick-out as distinct from getting up in the air and just calling a mark. But more often than not, the player is anxious to move it on. So there's a little bit of an indecision briefly. Is the referee going to blow his whistle? Do you have to put up your hand? So I look at, I don't know, does a mark for the kick out, it's not really a problem, but certainly looking at the forward mark, I mean, I have to say I'd love to see that go. Sideline balls, question mark, sidewards, backwards, can we move the ball forward? I mean, there's a lot of things, an awful lot of play obviously is going lateral. It's going from side to side, horseshoe stuff. over and back the sideline. It's taken way too long to get the ball into the scoring zone. Can you introduce a shot clock or something like that? I don't think you'll see anything of that to that extreme, but I think there are 2 or 3, and to justify their existence, I think they're going to have to do something. The forward mark for me, definitely out of that. I'd love to see that gone. Maybe sideline balls, you got to move forward. Not so sure about keeping 4 of players from your 15 inside the 45. It might be difficult enough to monitor that. So, but I think we will see a few changes.
Could you think of anything worse as a player if, you're up 2 points in a big game, you're one of those 4 that's supposed to stay up, and you're like been restricted, like, you know what I mean? Like, you're just, I want to get back and help. Like, I don't know if something like that could be policed very well. Like, very, very difficult to police something like that. We saw with Kilmacud and the extra man and that type of thing. The heat of the moment, like, very, very easy. One of them could drift down. I'm not sure if something like that is realistic that we could actually look at.
Yeah, you're probably right, Michael. Well, as I say, there's a lot of talk at the moment about something like that. But you're possibly right. As I say, Mickey Hart has an opinion that no need for tweaking at all. Maybe, and a lot of this falls on coaches and what they're coaching their various teams. Like, I mean, there's a lot of teams ultra defensive. I think Donegal have been noted for that, and a lot of fear with Jim McGuinness coming back into inter-county management that he might bring an ultra defensive. But they haven't. I think Donegal are scoring goals for fun, and they're a real score threat when they go to play right now. So, look, there isn't a whole lot wrong with the game, but a couple of tweaks, like I suggested there. Maybe not the 4, as you said, Michael. That might be difficult to police, and you'll say it'd be very difficult to restrict a player. What kind of punitive measures do you introduce then? Is it 30-meter free, or sure, that would make no difference. If I drifted back, I was one of the 4 that was supposed to say, how am I punished? That, so there's a myriad of issues that have to come into play in that scenario.
Do you know only 2 teams have scored more in the first several rounds of the league? There's been 5 games played than Donegal. 2 teams. So you've got Dublin in Division 1 and Down, who probably shouldn't really be in Division 3. They've a nice score difference at this stage.
Yeah. That's what I was suggesting there, Shane. Like, I mean, Donegal, who are known as being ultra defensive, they're right up there in the scoring charts, which means they're an attractive team to watch, because ultimately, when you go to a game, you want to be entertained. And that's what you see, free-flowing game and scoring, end-to-end stuff, getting the ball into scoring zone, all that kind of stuff is when you want to attract. Now, that said, our tendencies are I'm sure they're right up there for the National League. There's great interest, big crowd here, despite the inclement weather here at the weekend for the Mayo Roscommon game. Of course, we bring huge crowds wherever we go. And but you want to be entertained. If you're paying your good money to go into a show or into a theatre, you're going to be entertained. The same applies to Gaelic football. And there was a danger there for a while and I spoke to a lot of people that were turning their backs on games. But at the same time, the numbers are still turning out. And it's good value to go and see a good game of football. And I think the National League to date we've seen some very, very attractive football. I thoroughly enjoyed all the games I watched at the weekend, and I watched practically everything. I was feeling kind of guilty sitting on the couch yesterday watching so much football. But there were 3 great games, 3 very, very good games, and I was very impressed with Cork. Incidentally, they, for the first time, you began to see something really positive in that Cork performance. A lot of talent, a lot of good footballers, and unfortunately for Kildare, they were at the end of it, because I thought Kildare on another occasion could have won that game. Daniel Flynn was beginning to motor, and they were quite impressive. But Cork looked really, really good yesterday.
Yeah, Michael, you might take up the Cork point in a second, but just before we move on to that game, John, Joe Butler's asking, what did you make of Donnacha McHugh's performance? He obviously scored a couple of points, and he looks a good wing back.
I have to say, I was chatting to Martin Carney about him this morning, and guys around Castlebar. I live in Castlebar. A lot of people hugely impressed with them. Like, I mean, he certainly was in the running for a man of the match, and certainly his reputation has been embellished with that performance at the weekend. But then, and just again chatting to guys about it, a lot of people are just a little bit unsure about them and the Mayo quality at the moment, because Roscommon were dreadful. Like, I mean, that was one of the worst performances we saw in Roscommon in recent years in Castlebar. Normally, there's a huge bite and an edge to Mayo Roscommon encounter. It just wasn't there for Roscommon, particularly in the second half. They just fell away completely. So, huge underperformance from Roscommon. Were Mayo that good? Certainly Donnacha McHugh caught the eye. He was superb. And a much maligned player, Owen McLaughlin, before he tore his hamstring. I mean, if you're a wing forward and you're going out and you look at Owen McLaughlin, you're shaking your head to say, am I going to have to chase this guy? Because he's like a machine. He's up and down the pitch non-stop. And I know his skill set at times, it leaves him down, and particularly in front of goal, you feel the blinkers come down. But I have to say he's a nightmare. And, you know, Mayo back in the 16, 17s, the noughties had wonderfully talented half-back line. Owen McLaughlin, albeit not the best footballer in the world because he came to get or football late, being a great road cyclist, but certainly he's got an engine that's huge. But Donald McHugh, very, very impressive for sure. Yeah, he's a bright future. And Bob Toohey from Castlebar Club, another guy, he's a great athlete. He can go box to box. He's a very intelligent player. Didn't have his best game in the world last day, but he's worth persevering with.
Yeah, Michael, you might give us a bit of background on that Cork performance against Kildare.
Yeah, mad type of game, Shane. Cork were actually very, very poor in the first half. They'd only 4 points on the board after 34 minutes. And I'm sure, John, you've been involved in teams where in the blink of an eye, something happens and there's a spark to change the game. But they were trailing, what was it? They were down 2, 3 to 5 points coming into half time. Daniel Flynn had the ball in his hands, and you're kind of thinking they're going to get shot away here. And probably maybe go in 5 up at half time. He plays a hand pass. I said it the second he released it. It was kind of an ambulance pass. Kevin Flahav came in, kind of legally cleaned out Ryan Houlihan, flicked the ball out. Matty Taylor solos down 50 yards, pops the ball in over the top. Tommy Walsh, a cornerback, makes an absolutely brilliant finish, falling to the ground. And all of a sudden,
Well, I think we've lost him there.
Yeah, but Tommy Walsh, Shane, made a long bursting run. He ran about 120 metres to get on the end of that pass. It was a superb goal. And what Michael suggested there, in the blink, and you know, and the timing of that goal that Michael was alluding to there, and he's back now, was just fantastic because it gave them huge momentum just before half time. It's a killer blow to take a sucker punch of a goal like that. It should have ended up with a score down the other end. But I have to say, the run from cornerback, 120 metres up the field, and the finish was superb. But at the second half, I think you'll agree, Michael, Cork, there was flashes of real brilliance from players right around the park. And there was just something, because, look, I'm not going to suggest they're a sleeping giant, but there's been huge question marks over the last couple of years about Cork. They've just been limping along. But yesterday, I think we saw something from them that suggests, yeah, there's talent there for sure.
Yeah, I was kind of expecting what I saw in the second half for 70 minutes because it was, to me, like this was a kind of a do or die game for them, really. It was do or die for both, but I was expecting the hellfire and brimstone that we saw in the second half for the duration. But like once they came out, once they went in 1 down at half time, we've all been in that position where you've kind of robbed the position that you're in and you kind of think, geez, we haven't played ball here at all and we're in a great position. They came out, kicked 7 of the first 8 points of the second half, and then Conor Corbett gets a goal and the game is nearly over. And Corbett was brilliant in the second half. He ended up with 1-2. Chris Jones ended up with 3 from play. Colin O'Callaghan in the middle of the field was brilliant as well. He ended up with 3 from play. And Kildare were relying on place balls. I think Kevin Feely's free was the only score they got in the third quarter. Then they got a lucky enough penalty, I would say, that kind of got them back into it. And then I think Cork hit the next 3 points after that. They were 2-15 to 3-5 up, and Kildare hit the last 4 and made it kind of tight at the very end. But really, Cork were probably 7 or 8 points the better team in the second half. And it's a big win for them. I think mathematically, Cork can still go down. Mathematically, I think Kildare can somehow save themselves, even though I think Richard Commons had it on Twitter here. This is the sequence of events that needs to happen, I think, for Kildare to save their bacon. I just get it up here. He just says, Kildare's path to a miraculous survival. Beat Donegal and Louth, which would be difficult. Fermanagh lose to Louth and Cavan, and Cork pick up at least a draw against either Meath or Armagh. So that would leave Fermanagh bottom on 3 points and Kildare and Louth on 4 points, with Kildare staying up on head-to-head. So there's plenty of things need to go their way to stay up. It was a hell of a lot better yesterday from Kildare, but that 10 or 15 minutes after half time, you can kind of understand why it happened. A team low on confidence after playing real well. Daniel Flynn looked re-energised. Kevin Feely was re-energised too. Had themselves in a good position. Then all of a sudden, your lead has gone up in smoke, and
And
then a good fourth quarter.
Momentum is huge,
Yeah.
Michael, as well. And I agree. Kildare just looked at it. It's unfortunately, the confidence completely gone from the team. I agree with you. They played quite well. On another occasion, that performance, particularly in that first half, would have been good enough to get a victory and get 2 points on the board. But right now, they're in a very, very sticky position. Of course, the threat, if you want to look at that, of a Tailteann Cup is looming over them. But you just get the sense. And particularly Louth have been fantastic. Louth, I think they've only 2 points on the board. So there's a vulnerability with Louth as well. I think Louth are down there am I right in saying there's 2?
Yeah.
2, yeah.
Yeah, their league campaign has been poor. Kildare themselves, even though Louth have picked up a performance, and they were very, very good yesterday, I believe, against Donegal. I didn't see, obviously, anything in that game. But that should be a cracker. And go down the home stretch right now. Teams fighting for survival. You're going to have some interesting results, and big refereeing decisions and big calls. But will they survive? Will Kildare survive? I'm not so sure.
Yeah, Adrian
just on that, Shane, because it's different when you see a team in a flesh. Like Adrian says, should Glenn Ryan resign? It really looks like Kildare squad has completely given up. And alongside the nonsense with the chairman of the county board, once Cork hit back, they folded. Yeah, but to me, it didn't look like they'd given up on the pitch. Far from it, and there was still plenty of energy. And I know 3-9 is probably not the best total in the world, especially if you take the goals away, because there's only 12 scores. But it's still, their average before yesterday was 10.25 points per game that scored in the league. So they nearly doubled that. They hadn't scored a goal in the league so far. They hit 3 yesterday, probably created more goal scoring chances in yesterday's game than they had throughout the whole way throughout the league. Funny story, actually. I had to get back to the train station as quick as possible to get the train back up. And I literally just said to the Kildare boys in the Kif van, I said, boys, will you drop me down to the train station there on your way out or whatever? So I jumped in. They were half reluctant before I kind of convinced my way in anyway, and jumped out and chatting them, and they weren't too happy about the result anyway. But we got this bit of a goodie bag from Super Value, because obviously it's Super Value Park and Queeve. So I was jumping out to say thanks. I gave the 2 boys a bottle of wine. So I don't know if they chalked it off. Hopefully the driver didn't, but I don't know if the 2 boys chalked it off on the return journey back to Newbridge or wherever they were going.
John, these Leinster teams, though, we're kind of hoping and praying that, Meath, will you ever come on and produce a team that can challenge Dublin? Kildare, the same. Louth, to be fair, have made serious strides in the last couple of years. But, look at the way Dublin beat a much changed Derry, to be fair. But, it looks like Dublin have gotten back to where they used to be a couple of years ago, or they're approaching that. And then the rest of Leinster still isn't making up the ground.
Yeah. Look, Shane, it's fact, it's reality. Dublin are just streets ahead right now, and right now they have to be everybody's favourite to retain another Ireland. They're just playing so well. They've got so much quality up front, in particular, where teams, most inter-county teams, you look at Derry, they're probably over-reliant on likes of Shane McGuigan, and they've got Conor Glass, who's awesome at middle of the field. But if anything happens to Shane McGuigan, I think there's an ordinariness about Derry to a certain extent. I don't think they're going to be contenders because of the deficiencies up front. You contrast that with Dublin and just look at the quality that they have right around the park and the depth in their squad. And you've, Fenton, he's absolutely awesome.
He's something else, John, isn't he? He's a machine. Fenton.
He's a machine, but his game intelligence, it's a combination of everything. He's just got everything. He's the most complete player in the modern era, and he rarely underperforms. He just delivers every time. And you know exactly what you're going to get from him. And then you take a look at the quality of them up front. And then add to that, Kieran Kilkenny comes in and he's really, really returning to a rich vein of form. The last 2 games in particular, he's been absolutely superb. So right now, if you're a betting man, you're putting your money nowhere other than onto Dublin to go on and win 2024 Ireland title. Because now Kerry yesterday, people look at Kerry and say, well, look at their midfielders, they're a bit of an Achilles heel. But I thought Jim O'Connor put in a super performance yesterday. I think he was man of the match. And there was something good about Kerry yesterday. But right now, Dublin are just streets ahead. And when it comes to the Leinster challenge, Shane, the reality is not there. They're simply not good enough. I mean, Meath certainly winning the Thatcham Cup last year, beaten down, they look quite impressive. I don't think they're built on that to any large extent. I think they're doing reasonably well in this league, but I don't think they've made that extra jump. And it might take another year for them if it comes at all. But I mean, that jump, you'd expect them to make maybe a 10 or 15% improvement in this year. It still will be a long way short of them contesting and competing with Dublin. And the same applies obviously to Kildare. So unfortunately, it is what it is. Like, I mean, we have a very competitive championship. You will have in up north for sure. Ulster will be very, very competitive. You'll have fun here, certainly down here in Connacht with Galway, Roscommon and Mayo. I mean, Leitrim and Sligo should be reasonably competitive, but not, when it comes down to it, it's going to be between those three that I mentioned. And unfortunately, down to Munster, unless something happens to Kerry. So we can more or less predict who's going to win the provincials in two of the provinces, and maybe a third down here if Mayo continue to build and look good. But we'll have to wait and see what Galway, when they get Coleman and Shane Walsh and Sean Kelly back again, even though he's back playing, I think, another couple of games to see the really best on him. Then he's another super footballer. When he togs out for Galway, they're just a different animal. Whatever he does, he just lifts everybody around him for Galway. He's a super footballer. But Galway done on that. I know we're hopping around the place, Shane, we're in conversation, but Galway got a very, very valuable 2 points. Because if I recall, 2 years ago, it was Monaghan that sent them down in the last league match. I think they relegated them, and quite a controversial ending to the game, if I recall. But Galway, without some of their big players yesterday, particularly the big two up front, Comer and Walsh, got a great result yesterday. And that might just save them. I think it will.
And like the 3 goals all came from Monaghan's inability to deal with a ball going into the area. Of course, their number one goalie is over doing an NFL combine at the moment. He was doing a kicking last night in an NFL stadium. How much does it make you pull your hair out when you just concede goals from a break in from a high ball 3 times?
It was terrible. It was just so unfortunate for them. And that was the difference. Obviously, I think they lost by 6 in the end. And you would think that 2 of those goals, they were of a fortuitous nature for Galway. It was just a disaster, not being able to deal with them. And loads of bodies around the place, slight indecision from everybody, not necessarily the goalkeeper, but you felt defensively they just could have done a little bit better. And certainly, if they hadn't conceded those goals, who knows? But I thought Galway, there was a little bit of a greater urgency to them. The last Robert Finnerty again, he began to struggle with a lot of injuries. I think he was replaced at half time. But so that'd be 3 of their starting forwards didn't play in the second half, and yet they went on and won reasonably comfortably. So that was a big result for Porrick Joyce, and certainly takes the pressure off Galway, because I think even 5 points will probably keep them up.
Michael,
just a quick one, John. I'm just wondering, what was your perspective on Mickey Hart kind of resting, for want of a better word, a fair whack of his frontliners? Is it a case of that they have themselves in a good position in the league and he wanted to learn a lot about his squad on Saturday night, or what do you make of it?
A combination of all of those things. I think, resting Conor Glass in particular, he hasn't had a breather in 2 years. In fact, to see him come back and play in the first round of the National League after his exploits with the club, I thought he could have done a benefit from a rest. Now, of course, he put his hand up. He said he wanted to play. But I think in the greater scheme of things, Mickey Hart taking the decision he did last week, recognising that they're secure, he has come out and said, look, that's what we want, a Division 1 status retained for another year. They still, of course, can make the National League final and wouldn't rule them out of playing the National League final, because the breather that those boys have got will bring them back fresh for the next round, for round number 6. And I think it was a smart thing to do. I thought it might have come a little bit earlier, but obviously he wanted to get his 6 points, secure his status, and now he can have a right cut in the last 2 games. If he wants to make a league final, I'm not quite sure he does, but knowing Mickey and the way he wants to win leagues, he certainly would want to go and make a National League final and really test his players. A little bit of gamesmanship perhaps going on as well, resting up a couple of players, because he might be looking down the road and feel that, we're going to be meeting the Dubs somewhere, and let's not show our hand just this area of the season. So there's a little bit of that going on as well. And he probably sat down at the start of the league campaign and said, okay, what game should we rest players in? And they might have just targeted the Dublin game and said, listen, we won't show our hand in that particular game. And if we're lucky enough to be secure, we'll rest up the 5 or 6 that he did. But I just feel that they're a little bit over-reliant up front on Shane McGuigan. He's just he's a super footballer, as we know. And I think that they really do need 1 or 2 to supplement his performances. And they're over-reliance on him. They just need somebody else to do a bit of the heavy lifting for him up front. And that just might be their Achilles heel. And I'm sure they're going to find that bit of quality that they need.
But surely Kerry are more reliant on David Clifford, though, than Derry are on Shane McGuigan.
Yeah, they are. But I just think they have a better spread. Paulie, on his day, he's in the category up there as being one of the class forwards of the modern generation. He's such a work ethic and what have you. I just feel they have a little bit more, to be quite honest with you, Shane. David, you see what Owen Merchant did to David Clifford when they played Dublin 2 weeks ago. Yeah, did a wonderful job. But that's just the work ethic right around the park. Dublin are displaying a great energy. And you'd wonder, David Clifford underperformed in last year's All-Ireland final, and you see what happens. He just misfired, and he was spooked by Michael Fitzsimons to a certain extent. Would that ever happen again? It might do. And that's what happens on big occasions when your big star player is held like he was by Michael Fitzsimons, who had a brilliant game on him. But it's all that's part of the scene. People would have different opinion on Shane. David Clifford is superb. If anything happened to him, he's injured for any of the big games in the championship, you would feel that they mightn't have enough to get over the line, and that's why I'm taking the box for Dublin.
Okay, well, look, John, brilliant to have you on the show again. Hopefully we'll do it again soon. But and that stories of your army days as well. Very much enjoyed that.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Cheers, John.
Okay, great to have John Maughan on there. He's always brilliant to chat to, and about the football and the stories as well. Great character. Will we go back? Is there anything else you want to talk about in the football that we haven't really ticked the box on before we go back to that SWOT analysis on the hurling?
There's probably, Asher, listen, there's plenty of stuff even down the divisions as well. Depending on, we have another guest coming on in a minute. We can fly down through the divisions if you want to come back to the hurling after, if that suits. John mentioned the Offaly result there. Obviously, they've been struggling to get points on the board. Had performed well in a couple of games, but kind of really, really heartening to put 5-15 on the board against Wicklow yesterday, and leave absolutely no doubt about it. They weren't hanging on or anything like that. This is a really dominant performance. Declan Kelly, who obviously knows Cormac Egan very well from his under-20 days, has put him wing back, and he just seems to be galloping into the space that's there. He's not kind of confined, and he has an unbelievable turn of pace, so they can play inside and take a ball and take a man on. But he seems to be even more dangerous, even with the under-20 hurlers last year. If he gets ahead up his team, he's very, very hard to stop. And we've seen the way positions
unless
change.
you run into 6 Cork backs who are monsters.
Unless 6 Cork backs run into you. That's a different thing. But we've seen with Conor McCarthy from Monaghan even going back wing back and winning an All-Star wing back, really good forwards are thriving even coming from deep now. And it's a tactic that Declan Kelly seems to be utilising with Cormac Egan. It's definitely working. Important to get points on the board there. Offaly's fate is in their own hands now, which is hugely important. Just the Clare result, I think, is worth mentioning too. This obviously was the Mark Fitzgerald derby, going back managing against the team that he took over from. Ray Dempsey last year, midway through the league of Limerick, and he's obviously over Clare now. And take away that square ball that was not a square ball realistically against Westmeath, and Clare are in a good spot anyway, and if they can get a result against Down, they potentially, and get a result after that as well, they could end up in a league final. But that square ball has cost them so far. They basically would probably be unbeaten in Division 3, and having come back down from Division 2 when Cathal O'Connor retired, and an exodus of players. Owen Cleary's not involved this year as well. He took a year out. They're doing particularly well when you consider Colm Collins is gone. You maybe think, I know he's put a culture in place there, but you're maybe thinking, can somebody really carry on the work that Colm Collins has done in Clare? But Mark Fitzgerald seems to be making a fairly decent fist of it at the minute.
Yeah, it's quite outrageous because often you see a totemic manager who's been there for a long time, they struggle to replace him. And look, I mean, it's different levels and all that, but right, trying to replace Alex Ferguson or whatever, that's still an issue with Man United. You could argue Sean Boylan, he's still never been replaced with Meath. They've been there for so long, and you'd have to credit Desi Farrell. I know you might say he's working with some of the best talent in the country, and he's got great facilities and infrastructure around him, and so on and so forth. But it does feel like, okay, maybe it took a little while and there's a couple of years there where it wasn't brilliant. But, it feels like it's not as big a deal as it was before that Jim Gavin isn't there anymore.
Yeah, I've never bought that argument of, anybody could manage any team or anybody could manage any players. Like, some people would say that about even great club teams down through the years. Sure, anybody would manage them. Look at the talent that they have. Doesn't work like that. Just does not work like that. And if the best team in the country or the best squad in the country are not being managed correctly and they're not happy with how they're been trained and how they're being coached and everything that's going on, that will bear fruit on the pitch and they won't perform to that level. So yeah, I think even like Desi's All-Ireland last year was probably one of the great All-Irelands to win, particularly with the age profile and just on the dubs as well. Kind of thinking James McCarthy's played very, very little. Mick Fitzsimons hasn't played at all. Stephen Cluxton hasn't played at all. We're presuming he's back. And there's a couple of other players there maybe that haven't featured or featured very, very little. And you're kind of thinking they're in fairly rude health now. And they just seem to be, like Kilkenny's playing on the front foot now. Fenton is looking to take on a man every time he gets the ball. Con is nearly looking to take on a man every time he gets the ball again. And there's an energy to them and an enthusiasm to break a tackle nearly every chance they get. And yeah, that makes them dangerous. The only thing is you're kind of wondering, geez, are they nearly playing too well at this stage of the year, especially when you compare it to maybe this time last year. But I don't know, when you're playing that well, it's kind of very, very hard to hold lads back and hold the team back. And I'd say them boys are fairly hard to hold back at the best of times.
A bit like Man United, they scored too early against Man City yesterday, and eventually they were caught. And they were caught nicely. Just David Clifford, the melee that he was involved in. Bit of a thing of nothing, but there was a melee at the end of it. And given that he didn't show probably his A side against Dublin at Croke Park recently as well, Jack O'Connor said afterwards, I don't think it's in David Clifford's interest to go boxing. But it's a thing of nothing really, but it's just maybe another little sign that not all is well with his form just at the moment.
Yeah, sure. Like, I don't know about you, but you often end up starting a row in a match if you're not happy with your form. You definitely have. It was the ace in your pack, to be fair. it was one of the things you brought to the table. Throw that ignorant lad from Bursley in there and create a bit of a schmozzle. But it's usually something that happens if you're not totally happy with how your game is going or you're a bit frustrated. And I'd say he probably is a bit frustrated. He would have been very frustrated with his Croke Park outing against Dublin, without a doubt. So, importantly though, they were able to get the result and just get the train back on tracks after what was a fairly chastening performance and a fairly chastening defeat up in Dublin the week previous.
Yeah, it was a bit of a beating for sure. Delighted to say now we're joined by Claire Coffey. Michael, you were teeing this interview up with Claire beforehand. If you want to just take the lead.
Yeah, Claire, great to have you. We just wanted to shine a bit of a light on, I suppose, some of the fixture issues, shall we say, that have arisen for your own club, Nafina, in Meath, and not just yourselves. I know there's been plenty of other clubs around the country, and I'd say the dual issue has been an issue in every county, I'd say, at different stages, particularly between LGFA and the Camogie Association. Can you just talk to us about the situation? I know you were placed in awkward situations even before the All-Ireland semi-final last year, but can you just talk to us about that and, been asked to play in consecutive days for what was some of the biggest games that you will ever play in All-Ireland semi-finals?
Yeah, thanks for having us. I suppose we ended up playing a semi All-Ireland final on the Saturday for Camogie, and that was up in Loud, and that was against Eglish. And then the following day we were basically asked to go ahead, like 23 hours later, basically play a game down in Cork against Glanmire, and it was also another All-Ireland semi-final. Both of them were intermediate, and like it was I suppose there was an appeal before that to but I think to both sets to see could we possibly change one of them. There was a weekend before and there was a weekend after, kind of as such free, and basically neither were willing to budge from that weekend.
That's, that does, it seems a bit mad, and like even he had it well flagged in advance. Now this wasn't something that came up 24 hours before the match. I think this was flagged the guts of about 10 or 11 days beforehand, like, but this I'd imagine
definitely.
Like you're
yeah, definitely. I think when we ended up playing a quarter, the Leinster quarterfinals basically for both, when we played Saturday and Sunday. I think that was the first week. That was like the first weekend in November, and we played on the Saturday. We played camogie, and the second day on Sunday we played football, and then we won both, and then it was like, right, great, we're through to semi-final. That was basically nearly like the following week. Same thing. I think we were playing camogie on the Saturday, or sorry, it was a football on the Saturday that weekend, and camogie the following day. And again, same thing. We weren't really as such probably bringing in it we weren't highlighting it as much, because again, we'd home advantage in one of the games, and then it was away, but again, it was only Leinster, so it wasn't quite as far to be travelling. And then thankfully the Leinster finals were actually on separate weekends. And I thought maybe then from then on, maybe we would possibly get, hopefully, a fair go at it, a fair chance of like basically getting a weekend dedicated to either camogie, and then the following weekend possibly, dedicated to football. But like that, we won the Leinster in both, and I think even before we possibly even won the Leinster in both, I think like it was, by the way, we're in Leinster for both of these finals, it could happen that we're going to be in an All-Ireland semi-final for both on the same weekend. Is there any chance of moving? And it just didn't happen, really.
And
Can I read it? I'm actually just going to read out your fixture schedule here, Claire, because I have it here.
Yeah,
This is what it was. So the Meath County final was played on the 15th of October against D Rangers. The Camogie County final was played 6 days later on the 21st of October against Kilmessan. Both were won. So in Leinster, the quarterfinals versus Naas on the 28th of October. And you played football the next day against Fingallians on the 29th of October. The following weekend, the 4th of November, you played camogie against Michael. And then the next day, you played football against Shelmaliers. And then the following weekend, you played the camogie final against O'Moore's from Laois. And then the weekend after that, you played...
The football final was against Shelmaliers. Yeah.
Sorry, yeah. Like this is like, so you back-to-back weekends of a Saturday, Sunday, another Saturday and Sunday. Then you'd Leinster final one code, Leinster final in another code.
Yeah.
Like I'm putting it this way: would this sort of fixture congestion happen, do you think, for a men's team?
I don't think so, because even wasn't a flag that possibly Naas were going to be in the possibility before they played the semi-final, I think, for their Leinster semi-finals or something like that. And it was down for, I think, were they down for basically a double header in Croke Park or a day after?
That's right, yeah. They were going to put a week between them, yeah.
Yeah, they were flagging that even before they played their semi-final, that, look, if the Naas lads win the football or whatever, because I think they'd won the hurling at that stage maybe, and if they'd won the football at that stage, then they were going to be like, look, we're going to put a week between them. And like, that's just sense, really. Like, and don't get me wrong, I obviously know they like the GA probably has more power of getting pitches and everything like that, and like it is difficult obviously to get fixtures and everything done, and they're like, it is difficult. But when we'd flagged it so early on, I think there could have been some sort of better arrangement or a better agreement, and like to leave it just to possibly we'll say Eglish or Glanmire making, will they change it? That's not really fair either. Like, should have been taken up by the associations, either one of them, and just been said, look, this game's been changed and that's it.
Do you see the integration of the associations helping? Like, at the moment, are those two associations, the ladies football and the camogie, are they almost like intentionally having a bit of a power struggle to sort of, I don't know, make players make a decision over which code they want to play? Like, what's the bottom line here? What's the reason for all of this?
I don't know. I think it is. I hope that's not the case. I really do hope that's not the case. I hope it is just the fact that it is just trying to get fixtures and whatever. But like again, kind of I suppose let down by Camogie and the LGFA, because like I'm not taking it away from, obviously Glanmire went on, they bet us, and then they went on to win the. It was it was the football that we ended up losing on the second day for in the semi All Ireland, and like had we got a fair chance, maybe we might have beaten them, or again they might have bet us on a different weekend. I'm not taking it away from them at all, but like that was kind of probably going to be I would say a once in a lifetime kind of opportunity. And I
Yeah.
think that maybe it would have like worked out had like fixtures being better done. I don't know, like I hope it's not the case, and I do hope that integration works and it does work, run as smoothly as possible. And if by 2027, like I know they put forward the 2027 as being like a date of full integration and all that, and it'd be great to see it. Like,
Yeah, Michael, to me, it's straight up power struggle.
Yeah, that's what I would think as well. And what's going to happen is the LGFA are going to lose half their players, and the Camogie Association are going to lose half their players. That's what's going to happen, because they're going to force a choice to be made. And Claire, I believe you're good enough, from what I believe, to be playing for the Meath ladies footballers, but you choose to play Camogie instead. But you obviously play dual. You're one of 9 dual starters. I think with Nafina, I think it's 12 in total. Like, unless something changes, like, ladies in your squad are going to be forced to potentially make a choice as well. Or the worst case scenario is some people will get cheesed off by it and potentially will not play at all because they've been pulled from Billy to Jack, and there's the emotional stress and everything that comes into it of that. And it is, and I remember even like on a much lower level playing senior hurling and playing junior football, and we weren't allowed to play junior football. You're told you're not allowed to play and you want to play, and what will happen here is either, unless something changes, girls are going to be forced to pick one or the other, or some will fall away, and that's a disastrous scenario realistically.
Yeah, like that's not what the LGFA or Camogie Association should be about. It should be basically providing as much support and allowing people to like basically play both if they want to play both. Like, okay, you'll say that I picked Camogie or whatever. I did actually start out playing county football for 2 years, whatever, and then I went to Camogie. And like that, there'd be girls on, let's say even Shauna Ennis there. She's a brilliant Camogie player, but like she plays football, and she could potentially play both or whatever. But like that, like just I don't know if fixtures wise would it even be possible. There was Aoife Minogue. She was like the best Camogie player on our team, and she was playing midfield for Meath last year. And like that, like she was under a good bit of like time constraints and stuff with fixtures. She'd have a fixture on a Saturday, a fixture on a Sunday. I think it actually did only happen maybe one time where she had to pick. I think, well, like one weekend she picked football and one weekend she picked Camogie, because I think in during the league last year, because I just think they actually clashed on the same day. But like that, I think at the club level in men's, it is definitely, I think, like week on week off. One week is usually like football, the other weekend hurling, and like that with Nace as an example, they were going to change it. So if they can get that going, and then possibly, I think it was said, we'll go one step further than the men's, because like there's not really a dual player in men's really, or there's not that many at all. But there is a couple still in like the ladies game, and like they should be just promoting that. And probably Cork is probably the best examples of having a few, but I don't think there's too many other clubs that or too many other counties that would have a lot of dual players.
The worry, Claire, is that basically with fixtures in the GAA, the dual player is nearly been like extinguished now at this stage, because it's so unmanageable. And the worry in the female game is that the same thing would happen. But the Nafina club are kind of trying to do something about this and raise a hell of a lot of awareness about it, because ye want to make sure whenever it happened to ye, and it was a very, very regrettable scenario and something that you can't get back, unfortunately, but ye want to make sure that this doesn't happen to other clubs the length and breadth of the country as well.
Yeah, so like obviously it's not going to change anything for us. In fairness, like what's after happening is after happening. So like, a teammate of ours, Rebecca O'Keefe, she'd actually only played football, but she actually wrote a really good letter, and it was an open letter to both associations, and it actually comes along with a petition, and everybody can sign up to it or whatever. You just literally put your name and I think it's your club, and like you can sign it or whatever. But basically the two main points is probably player welfare, making sure that you're not overloading basically players like we kind of basically ended up getting, and then just fairness really, like I would think is the two main points probably from her open letter to both associations.
Might just read out this comment here actually quickly, because Richard Hogan has hit the nail on the head here. He says the integration needs to start with these issues. Both associations need to be speaking to each other, and it looks like they are not. Pitches being not available, just excuses. There was that scenario on Saturday as well, where Mayo and Cork were down to play at 2:30 in Mallow. The pitch was obviously unplayable, so the game was moved to the 4G pitch in Páirc Uí Chaoimh, which is interesting because the Cork under-20s played the Kildare under-20s in Páirc Uí Chaoimh yesterday before the league game, but yet the ladies team, the ladies county team, weren't let into the main field. Ironically, the ladies team are actually sponsored by Super Value, which are the new sponsors of Páirc Uí Chaoimh. So like this is kind of one of many issues, and I'm sure pitches and things like that is something else, is another kind of big issue that you have to deal with plenty. But we'll actually post the link to the petition, Claire, underneath this show, and I know that there's a hell of a lot of big names on it already as well that are getting their weight behind it, because people see on the ground in counties the problems that players have in both codes. So hopefully between Sean Ennis raising it a couple of weeks ago and yourself, and I'm sure there'll be many more, we'll be able to affect a bit of change and make sure that it doesn't happen again with a bit of luck.
Yeah, hopefully it doesn't happen again, and if everybody gets out and just signs that petition, please. Basically.
Claire, thanks very much for coming on. Really
No
appreciate
problem.
it. Thanks a minute.
Very much. Thanks.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Okay, so there was a couple of other things we wanted to touch on in the football. I suppose, well, I'll just go through the results, I suppose, that we haven't touched on already. Donegal 117, Louth 15. So like Donegal's impressive form continues there. Fermanagh 11 points, 15 for Armagh. So Armagh, they're continuing to go from strength to strength. Cavan drew at Meath, neighbours there, 11 points apiece. Division 3, Down 217, Sligo 1-8. You already mentioned Offaly 5-15, Wicklow 10. Antrim 9 points, Westmeath 13. Westmeath keep their brilliant record going. Limerick 14, Clare 116. Then Division 4, Longford 116, Leitrim 13. Tipperary drew Waterford 16 points to 113. Wexford had a nice win away to Carlow 114-7. And then Laois, they kept their win and run going. That was 212 to 9-point win over London. So that's the fixtures there. I'm not sure if there's anything you want to add to that.
You might have the Division 4 table close to hand, because this is quite a sight. I know the league tables have it up on Twitter. This is quite a sight when you see Laois up the top, 10 points from 10. Leitrim on 6, Wexford on 6, Longford on 6, Carlow on 6, Tipperary obviously on 4. But there's a lot of teams fighting it out for that second spot. I was chatting Niall Carew last week, and they kind of got themselves in a good position with that last minute goal, that screamer that Colm Hulton got against Leitrim. But Wexford came down and gave them a bit of a lesson in Dr. Cullen Park at the weekend, and Wexford are after parachuting themselves back into the mix again. I have to mention Waterford as well. It's not exactly the most appetising job in the world that Paul Shanky took on down in Waterford there, but to get a result against Tipperary, I'm sure, is a big boost for them. I think they were only beaten a score by them in both other games that they played them in last year, both the Munster Championship and the Tailteann Cup. So to get a point on the board, very, very important for them. From a Tipperary point of view, the Tip have drawn with Waterford and they've drawn with London, which would be seen as, down towards the lower echelons of teams in the football landscape. And that's probably fairly worrying for Tipperary going forward.
Yeah, but you can't ignore the fact that Tipperary have had a huge turnover of players in the last 3 or 4 years. Like, how many players are still involved that won a Munster title in 2020, that brilliant time that, Tipperary beat Cork after Cork had knocked out Kerry? There's very few. Obviously, David Power has gone and Paul Kelly's coming in looking to pick up the slack. And they've had a couple of okay results in there. They've had a victory, a couple of draws. Fair enough, you'd say. Drawn with Waterford, who are the bottom team in the country at the moment. But, what right does Tipperary have to be beating Waterford just at the moment? So I think there has to be a little bit of patience with Tipperary. You can't just expect things to be turned around overnight. I also think that based on whatever panel Liam Cahill picks for the remainder of the season, that Kelly might end up picking up a couple of more players there. So look, I think a small bit of patience has to be required with Tipperary football just at the moment.
Yeah, I don't think you expect them to be in the bottom 2 or 3 in the country either, though, to be fair. Like, there's patience, and like patience kind of, and I'm not having a pop at anyone, but like, it's difficult when you're down towards the very, very bottom, and Tip are down towards the basement. It's kind of hard enough to have too much patience when you're down that far.
I know, yeah, but like, Tipperary aren't shipping massive beatings down there. The scoring differential that Tipperary have after 5 games is -1. So that'll just tell you that it's not like that they're a mile out of the picture all the time in these games. So, like, okay, even just looking at the fixtures, lost the first day out by 2 points to Carlow. Second day out, beat Longford away. That's a great result. Third day out, drew with London. You'd be expecting to win that. Then you've got Laois, who are top of the table with 5 wins from 5. Lost by a point there. And I think, if I remember correctly...
Last minute goal, wasn't it?
Well, it was 1-7-11. I feel like Tipperary might have conceded the last 4 points in that game. Okay. Not totally, I might be mixing up a game or two there. And then drew at Waterford. Like, it's not like these are disastrous results. If Tipperary had 1 or 2 points more, and you're talking about how close it is there, like, if Tipperary had one more win or one more draw and we're on 5 points there, all of a sudden you'd be saying, okay, we're not shocked that Tipperary are in Division 4 given the player turnover in the past couple of years. They're pretty much neck and neck with most of the pack there. Fair enough, Tipperary could have one result more, but I'd be cool enough about it at the moment and think there needs to be just a bit of patience.
You'd be cool enough. I think it would be disappointing that they weren't able to get, if they'd gotten wins in both of those games, they're on 6 points, and it's kind of a different scenario.
Hold on. Here's a comment. Traumspieler. I'd rather have Tip footballers last decade than most other counties. 2 All-Ireland semi-finals and a Munster Championship honouring the great Michael Hogan while they're at it. Not bad. Like, would you take Tipperary's last 10 years or would you take Offaly's last 10 years?
Are we bringing in under-21s into it?
No. Although Tip did all right at underage as well. If you stretch it back another 3 or 4 years, you have
the under-21 final against Tyrone would be within that time frame. Yeah, it's a fair point. It's a fair fall in all sense too, from an All-Ireland semi-final to there. But I do take your point. Listen, half of me was just kind of riling you up just to see what sort of a reaction I get, to be honest with you. But like, I think, like, people were going mad. We, Offaly been 0 from 4 after 4 games in Division 3. But when you look at how close the games were, I don't think there was anything to be going too mad about. And then they got a win at the weekend. Tipperary's score difference, as you said there, -1. They've obviously been very, very competitive. They've just they drew 2 games that they realistically would have been, nearly everybody would have been expecting them to win. I think they were 1-20 to beat Waterford at the weekend. It's just, that's probably a little bit disappointing, because getting wins in those games does help that, I don't like using the word transition, but it does help, increase the faith, shall we say, in the rebuild.
You think of the amount of counties out there that are perennial underdogs, and Tipperary in football within the last 100 years, maybe, started out life being a decent sort of hitter at football in the senior championship. But in the last 100 years, in terms of like a perennial underdog, I'm not sure too many counties would have done as well as Tipperary have done. Certainly in that last decade. Like, yeah, Traumspieler adds here, I'd take Tip's last decade ahead of Armagh or Meath or Cork. Like, that's true. 2 All-Ireland semi-finals and a Munster title.
Yeah, fair point. Yeah, the problem is that when you've had the high, to go to a real low is.
But like, as a Tipperary supporter, when that good stuff was happening, I was aware this isn't going to go on forever. You're kind of taking it as it is. Like, this is a bit of a golden generation. We've had some underage success. We've franked the form now. We've kind of, we've gotten a little, a bit of an ambush on Cork. We got our Munster title. We got to 2 All-Ireland semi-finals. The second one didn't go great. The first one pretty competitive. Created 10 goal-scoring chances against Mayo in 2020 semi-final, actually. So to some degree, that game could have been an awful lot closer. It's a big win for Tipperary. I've turned it around nicely, haven't I?
So basically what you're saying is that you had your fun and that's all that matters.
But everyone had their fun while that was happening. I remember being up. Do you remember that time Tipperary ransacked Galway at Croke Park? I think that was
quarter-final, yeah.
Like, I remember being there in the crowd as a supporter, and a load of the hurlers from the Tipperary team that later that year would go on and win the All-Ireland Championship in hurling. They were there watching it, and they were there loving it and buzzing. And you didn't have a massive crowd there, but everyone was going around to the entrance to where the players were entrance/exit to where the players go off the field at the end. And it wasn't a huge crowd, but everyone was over there. Like, it was kind of great stuff. There was some real highs in there amid 100 years of average enough stuff.
I'm not sure how we've ended up doing like a 10-minute segment on Tipperary football in Division 4, but I remember covering their Munster League game against Kerry in 22. I think it was Jack O'Connor's first game, and like the amount of I know a fair whack of Tipperary footballers, but the amount of new faces, the amount of lads that were being blooded and have been blooded and even are still being blooded is crazy when you consider, like, off the top, even like Conor Sweeney's only come back from the Crucian. I believe he's going back into contact in the next week or so, and he'd be a massive boost to have back. But Michael Quinlivan's not there, Conor O'Riordan's not there, Peter Atchison is retired. There's so many big names that are no longer involved. Yeah.
Take your pick. Okay, we'll go back to the SWOT analysis that we were doing of the Leinster Championship. I think we were just finishing up the threat. We were just about on the threats of Galway, weren't we? So what are the threats of Galway?
The threat, and I think I briefly mentioned it, was that if they don't get silverware this year, or if they don't maximise what they have this year, it could be the end of the line for a few players. And I know Henry is signed for, or he's agreed for another couple of years, but I don't know, would the mood music change even more significantly were they not to get silverware this year? Like, I thought they needed silverware the first year. They needed even more last year. Like, it's actually non-negotiable this year. And it'll be interesting to see whether they're able to deal with that pressure, because there's a they have to have a significant piece of tin in their locker at the end of this year, and that brings a fair bit of pressure with it.
Would a league title do anything?
I think it's unlikely, and I don't think so. Been honest with you, I don't think so, and I think it's very, very unlikely. But I wouldn't think it would suffice, really, considering a good cohort that he's having in 17. Now, they did win the league the year they won the All Ireland as well, obviously too. It definitely wouldn't do any harm if they were to win the league. Probably, maybe that little bit more confidence, maybe to help them get over the line in Leinster. But like, would it be a massive, massive, massive plus if they had a league title at the end of the year and nothing else? Probably not.
Okay, just a reminder, we're brought to you by orgaretro.com. Use the promo code OurGAme and you get 15% off. Also, we've got a couple of club fundraisers coming up. If you want us to do one for you, email events@ourgame.ie and we'll help get that set up for you. So, Michael, we'll move on then to Wexford. So, the strength of Wexford. What do you think?
Strengths. I suppose the fact that they still have the kernel of their team is probably still the backbone of that 2019 team. Matt O'Hanlon, Liam Oak, Dermot O'Keefe, Lee Chin, albeit I think he's going to miss the rest of the league with a hamstring injury. I think in a couple of years they're going to find it tough, but because I think there's, don't like use generational talents, but there's 5 or 6 players, Liam Ryan as well, that they're not going to be around on the scene forever. They're all still there now. You probably nearly go down through the whole spine of their team and you're thinking they're guys that are late 20s, maybe early 30s. They're all still on board at the minute, and they offer a huge experience, and they offer that they have that kind of winning experience as well from 2019. So I think still having all those players on board is huge, because I think when they go out the door, Wexford are probably set for a bit of a lull.
Richard Hogan says Wexford's strength, the sight of the black and amber jersey. Would you consider their playing style under Keith Rossiter this year, which you've talked about, because you've been at a couple of their matches? Would you consider that a strength given the style they've been playing previously?
I would say it's definitely more positive anyway. And they have a lot of, would say, lighter kind of bodies. Would say younger fellas. Would say the likes of Seamus Casey, the likes of Richie Lawler, Conor Hearn, even as well. They're not big 6'2", 6'3" players, so they're quite mobile. They're playing that kind of a style. It's it's no coincidence that David Franks is involved and that they're not playing exactly the same as Ballygunner, but it's a similar kind of a style, and they're playing to their strengths. They're not playing with a sweeper generally. They nearly always have 2 players up and 2 players playing fairly deep. Definitely one playing really deep and the second player not too far away. So I definitely think it's a lot more positive, and they're probably playing to their strengths a good bit more than Conor McDonald standing on the edge of the square by himself and 2 or 3 kind of defenders around him and just launching a kind of a ball in, a kind of a hopeful ball in. Definitely think it's a good bit more positive this year so far.
I would say their weakness is just the injury concerns. Like you've kind of mentioned Lee Chin there. We haven't seen Conor McDonald, or certainly much of him just yet. Kevin Foley going off injured recently. That was early on in the game also. That's not ideal.
Liam Ryan, Rory O'Connor.
Have we seen Liam McGovern as well? And just the total concern over when Lee Chin isn't there, do they have that sort of powerhouse who can step in and win that ball in a 50-50 situation when you need it? So I'd say the injury, like Rory O'Connor, like if we could see him play a full 2 seasons in a row, I'm sure he'd have himself right the tick for an all-star. So it's just that whole thing, the opportunity for them.
Well, I think there's a load of kind of new, not necessarily new faces. They've all been exposed to senior inter-county, the vast majority of them under Dara Egan. Like Corey Byrne-Dunbar, this must be his 3rd year, I would say. Richie Lawler's been in around the scene as well. Conor Foley's been in around the scene too. I suppose there's an opportunity for those guys to turn into the new leaders of what's going to be the new Wexford in a couple of years. I'd say Shane Reck and Damien Reck as well. Like you kind of nearly think those boys have been around a hell of a long time. They're not around that long, but there's an opportunity for some of those players to be, the leaders turn into the leaders of this team. And the fact that Keith Rossiter was with them, not the Rex obviously, but some of the younger fellas at under 20, and the fact that he was with, Davy for those 5 years. When Davy was senior boss as well, there's a fair opportunity. There's a fair continuity here. There's a fair opportunity as well for the new faces to kind of step up and basically say that it's their time. And I think he's placed a lot of responsibility and faith in them, and they've backed they've justified it so far. So I would say that that's probably one of the main opportunities thus far, anyway.
A couple of threats. Number one is having lost to Westmeath, the manner. And it's not necessarily losing to Westmeath, because Westmeath have some fine hurlers and they've pushed a couple of teams close in recent years. But having lost from 17 points ahead, is there going to be a mental frailty on a big occasion when it's really put up to the team? Now, they've other credit in the bank, All-Ireland semi-final, winning Leinster, blah, blah, blah. They have credit in the bank, but there is that. And then the concern and threat I would also put in there is Keith Rossiter would love to have played 5 to 10 games, including challenge matches at this stage, where he's got his full team out, Lee Chin, Rory O'Connor, Liam Ryan, so on and so forth. What opportunity will he have to have seen his full team melded together with his own playing style by the time it comes to the tough stuff? So I think that is a threat, moulding his team together.
Yeah, I've said that to you before.
And free taking here from Richard Hogan, actually.
Yeah, we'll come into the free taking in a second. Like, it's one thing having a list of boys to come back, but it's another thing having those boys match fit for the Leinster Championship, and a lot of them aren't going to be. Like Matt O'Hanlon hasn't played a minute yet. I think he played against Laois in a challenge game a couple of weeks ago. Liam Ryan hasn't played a minute. Rory O'Connor hasn't played a minute. Joe O'Connor has played very, very little. Liam Og, Dermot O'Keefe, like it's great having them. And now you have Lee Chin on the back foot going into the championship probably as well. And little doubts hanging over that. So that's definitely a threat. And the free taking, you would have to say, is an issue as well, in that, well, Seamus Casey's probably going to take them for the next couple of games, but they're not where the elite teams are in terms of percentages as regard converting frees. And had they, were they more reliable, they probably would have had 2 points on the board against Clare rather than the one that they got from the draw.
Okay, Dublin. By the way, people keep getting your comments in. Let us know in terms of the SWOT analysis, any of the teams in Leinster. And if you missed the Munster one, the video's on YouTube, but go ahead and throw in any comments if you want to. Dublin then, strength.
From what I've seen so far, anyway, Brian Hayes is a big strength coming in, because there's enough kind of lads maybe not on the scene and doubts about different lads. He would definitely be one. I'd say Donncha O'Doolig would be another one who you've seen plenty of. There's a decent crop. Dermot O'Doolig, sorry. It is like I don't know if I'll ever get
him and O'Donnell.
Donncha O'Donnell, and I don't know if I'll ever get my head around that, to be honest with you. There's a decent crop, and you'd know a bit more about it. There is a decent crop of younger players coming through, which is a strength. It's not as if there's not a nice bit of talent there. The issue probably is, and it's probably a weakness in itself as well, is that those guys are going to have to learn on the job, and they're going to be inexperienced. Like what your strength is also a weakness, in that you've got talent coming through. They're probably going to be overexposed almost as well, and which I would probably view as a weakness too. But just like, what would you view? You're probably a bit closer to the scene than I am. What would you view as the strengths in Dublin?
Yeah, I do think there's plenty of hurlers and athleticism there. Like, I know Owen O'Donnell has obviously been tried in wing back, and he played full forward until he got injured after about 20 minutes against Galway. And because he seems to have had a nice little layoff now, when they bring him back in, I think they'll have settled their forward line at that stage. So he'll probably go back in full back. So you've therefore got a very seasoned goalkeeper in Sean Brennan with brilliant puckouts. Now, and obviously, you know, the whole team was very poor against Limerick, but just if you go through the spine, you've got him as goalkeeper, you've got Owen O'Donnell as full back, you've got Chris Crummy as centre back. That's where it looks like they're going to play it. Then you've got Conor Burke, who'll probably drop from midfield and sort of sweep. Very, very competent player. You've got the pace of Brian Hayes going up through the centre. You've got Ronan Hayes, hopefully he can stay fully fit. Whether he plays inside or half forward, he's going to bring something to it. And then you've got Paul Crummy as your target man up at the full forward line. And there's a lot of good players who can play the other positions, you know, out wide, the wings, corners, whatever it might be. So I do think that they've got a good spine, and they've got a couple of dynamic young players in O'Dooling and Brian Hayes. So, yeah, I actually think that would be their strength. Like you're saying, there's a bit of a decent spine to the team. A weakness...
Injuries anyway, definitely.
Injuries have definitely been a big problem. Their conversion rate, I mean, I watched them hit 16 wides against Galway. I watched them miss 3 very good goal chances. So are they clinical enough up at the top end of the pitch? And will the ball stick in the full forward line often enough? That's the big challenge. That's what's proven to be the weakness time and time again in recent times. And then another thing is, last year they were almost criticised for playing in Croke Park in the league games. This year they're gone the other way and they're playing in Parnell Park. And like I said to you coming into the Tipperary game, I don't think it'll suit them. I think Tipperary will beat them up in the tighter confines. And now they're going to continue playing their games in Parnell Park, and then they'll be thrown back into Croke Park at some stage. And will they be a fish out of water when they should be taking the Croke Park medicine now, or getting used to it now? You know, like I was saying earlier.
That's an odd one. Yeah, that's an odd one now that they've flipped, particularly because results probably, like they got the big result against Wexford in Croke Park last year. So you'd imagine they'd be playing every game there if possible. Maybe it's not always available to them as their home venue.
But it's not available to the Dublin hurlers. I mean, I find that very, very surprising. Like, I'm sure Micheál Donoghue gets good sway. They're not going to tempt him in as manager and then tell him, by the way, you're going to have to play all your matches in Parnell Park. I don't care if you want Croke Park. And last year they gave it to him.
The only thing is, Shano, if Dublin are playing a standalone league fixture, shall we say, in Croke Park, the Dublin hurlers, like Croke Park would be operating at a loss, basically, because there are not going to be enough people coming through the gates. So that could be something to it as well.
Do they have enough time to sort of organise that and pair up matches?
They would have to be fair generally, and obviously they had that double header last weekend. But I'd be the same as you. Dublin are a mobile athletic team. I would say playing in Croke Park is a necessity for them.
Yeah, Traumspieler says strength for Dublin is having Micheál Donoghue as manager. Shrewd and proven, should still be Galway manager, and they would be better off. Okay, opportunity for Dublin. I would say the opportunity is the low expectation from absolutely everybody. So they could catch teams off guard this year, again, if they get everyone on the pitch.
Yeah, it's not mad to think that they have an All-Ireland winning manager on the sideline, and I would say that the same as you there. I'd say expectations are pretty low, and even after after taking a bit of a shellacking from Limerick, I'd say expectations got a bit lower as well.
Hey, can I ask you, the shellacking they took against Limerick a week and a half ago, whatever it is at this stage, like other teams have taken that same shellacking, as in some of the top teams that we don't quickly dismiss forevermore, they've taken beatings. Like think of Galway in the All-Ireland semi-final from the 25th minute onwards last year, beaten out the gate. For long spells, Kilkenny, especially in the second half, beaten out the gate. They beat teams out the gate. It doesn't mean that you're done forevermore.
No, it doesn't. I suppose a lot of it would be the fact that there was no Keane Lynch and there was no Declan Hannon and there was no Aaron Gallan and there was, you know what I mean, like that they were missing.
Well, there was no Keane Lynch and sorry, who was it? There was no Declan Hannon and no Sean Finn last year. When Limerick were hammering these other teams.
Fair point. It's just, I suppose, that Limerick were able to put 330 on them without probably some of their best forwards, I suppose, would be worrying, so, to say the least.
Yeah, fair enough. Opportunity for Dublin then? Just I suppose that's it. No, like we've just said, expectations.
The threat is that Micheál Donoghue is going to have 2 years done. I forget what he signed up for at the start, but the threat is that he could have 2 years done, and I suppose that could be that, and we're maybe a little bit none the wiser about where Dublin are. Like I'm not really any the wiser about how they play exactly, or how, even the makeup of their forward line. Probably a good bit wiser about their defence and that, especially with Crummy starting at 6 the last day, and he was probably thrown into the deep end after in his first game back, probably with Dublin in the guts of about 2 years. But I suppose I'm not really any the wiser about how Dublin play under Micheál Donoghue at the minute, and the threat is that this season could blend into last season, and I don't know. Like, would he get a third year? Would he want a third year? So the threat is that could all go by pretty quickly, I would say.
Yeah, and Donald Burke is obviously someone I should have been mentioning earlier when I was talking about the spine of the team, because he's brilliant. But also, if you look at the Leinster Championship last year, they played 5 games in it and they lost only 1. Now they drew 2 and they won 2, which is fine. And then last year in the All-Ireland quarter-final, they got shellacked by Clare.
Shellacked is the word of the day.
It sure is. So I suppose, is the threat that basically they'll go through another year having not really laid a glove properly in a big knockout game, and that it'll just feel like another year you come away and you're almost a bit disinterested in the team. As a spectator, obviously I'd have a great interest in Dublin, but like I feel at times other people, they're kind of disinterested in the team because they're not laying a glove, they're not putting up, they do put up scores at times, but it's just not a glitzy team to watch. And
and the thing about that, Shane, is that I think everybody wants them to be up there, really kind of duking it out with the bigger teams. I think, and like any hurling person I've spoken to, they'd love to see another face at the table, and it's a bit frustrating because you're kind of thinking there's plenty of talent there, but it's just not, they're not able to get there. They're not able to lay a glove on these big teams consistently. Like, they can throw it down to Galway and, be up 10 points nearly against Galway. And then obviously it ended up in a draw or whatever. But they can't seem to do that consistently. Like, they were wide open against Clare last year in the All-Ireland quarter-final, coming into it in decent form. And I think people just want to see them getting to a level and staying there. We're seeing glimpses, but we're just not seeing enough.
Okay, then we'll move on to Antrim. Strength for Antrim? You'd have to put in some of their league form, even the fact that they lost to Dublin the last day out or a couple of games ago, but they were in a position to win that game, and it was an individual error that cost them. And maybe you could sort of jump onto the weakness straight away and say, is the depth going to be a concern now? The fact that they've had to convert an outfielder into a goalkeeper after losing Ryan Elliott and then losing some of the other Dunloy lads and Neil McManus, that maybe there's going to be a depth issue, maybe a little bit of a leadership issue also, the likes of Keelan Malloy not there too, but that will catch up with them this year. I'm not sure if I have your audio there, Michael. I seem to have lost him for a second. But just in terms of like Antrim this year, like kicking on from I'm just going to go and find the way their fixtures kind of pan out this year, just to make sure that I've got their sort of run in Leinster. But Michael, I'm just going to go through the way they're running in Leinster is going to happen this year. So in round 1, they're away to Kilkenny. Round 2, which is just a week later, they're at home to Wexford. I mean, what an unbelievably tough start that is. Then a couple of weeks after that, they're away to Dublin. And then finally, you're going to have them at home to Carlow. Sorry, they've got Galway as well. And then at home to Carlow the last day out, which everyone would be expecting to be the de facto relegation playoff. Like, it's a really tough run through Leinster.
Yes, but I would think that they would feel that potentially they could get a result in Corrigan against Wexford and against Carlow. Like the last couple of years, like they got a result against Dublin last year, should have won. They should have got a win against Dublin in Corrigan Park this year as well in the league. I'd say Darren Gleeson will have his pen circled around that Wexford game. Like, imagine they were able to get a result. It would leave them in that second game. It would leave themselves in a half decent position going forward, and that's not beyond the realms of possibility either. But you probably would be thinking that it's coming down to that Carlow game. And to be fair, it's a good one and an important one to have at home.
Yeah, and part of the opportunity for them is they went through those 5 Leinster games last year. They lost 3 of the games, fair enough. But even their scoring differential wasn't brutal at the end of it. They were minus 26 after 5 games, losing 3 of them. So they've been through this, whereas Carlow, haven't been through this. So what would be I would see that as part of the opportunity that they have that experience. In terms of threat then?
The threat is that, I would say, given the personnel that they're missing and some of their best players in recent years, the threat will be that, I'd say, something that you mentioned there potentially about weakness, that the depth is not good enough, and also that there's almost like there's an experience deficit there as well. There's a threat for probably a mindset potentially to set in that we're behind the 8 ball before things start here. We're down, you could fill half a page with the players that they're going to be missing this year. There's a threat there that I suppose a negative air could potentially set in, and I suppose that's something Darren Gleeson was trying to prevent against when he made some comments after, I think it was the first game when they were well beaten by Limerick. But that definitely is a threat, that just the absence of experience, that there's a threat for them to be potentially bowled over, particularly by the bigger teams, that they just won't have the experience on the field to stem the blood loss and stem the tide when things are going bad. And there's a threat of taking, I would say, a couple of big beatings in Leinster.
Carlow, I think one of the strengths for them this year has to be their form so far. They've won 3 games out of 3. So a weakness then, do they have enough scorers if Martin Kavanagh is kept quiet, or if he gets injured, for example?
I would say they do. In fairness, Chris Nolan can take over free taking duties, and he's capable of hitting 4 or 5 in a game. Paddy Boland, we saw how good he was in the McDonagh final last year. Donagh Murphy is kind of coming through. He's obviously an All-Ireland Colleges winner with Cairns. Like, none of them are going to replace Marty Kavanagh if something happens to him, but they'll all maybe chip in collectively, throw in John Nolan as well in on top of that too. I think their depth is probably better than it has been, and I think they now have a squad maybe that they haven't had in recent years. Nearly everybody they want on board. Just a matter of, as you said there, it's a matter of trying to keep them all on the pitch and keep them injury free.
Okay. Opportunity for them?
I would say something similar to with Dublin. Like, most people are going to probably think that Carlow are going to go straight back down after coming back up. Most people are going to think it's between Carlow and Antrim. The last time they were up, they found it tough enough, but they were very, very competitive in the first game at Galway. I think, wasn't that result against Galway what ultimately ended up signalling Galway's exit from the Leinster Championship on score difference? Yeah, beaten by 6 in Salt Hill. So there was an opportunity potentially to get a result, and like, Wexford and Dublin will have to be on guard against Carlow, and they'll have to be on guard against Antrim as well, because there is a potential for an upset. And Wexford have seen it. They saw it in 2022 when they drew at Westmeath in Cusack Park. They saw it last year when they blew a 17-point lead against Westmeath as well. You can't take these teams for granted, and there is an opportunity there potentially to take a scalp. And if you are able to take a scalp, it would leave Carlow in a hell of a good position going into that final game against Antrim, where, you know, a draw would keep you up. If you have points on the board, you don't necessarily need to win that game.
Yeah, I think confidence as well. Like, look at their start to the championship, away to Galway, who like to pulverise teams who are a little bit off the challengers. We keep talking about that this season. Then if Dublin come to town and get a victory, now that's obviously the opportunity as well. They won't have a sort of an inferiority complex to Dublin. But if they lose that game, and maybe if Dublin hit form at the right time, then your confidence all of a sudden is compromised ahead of your next game, which is welcoming Kilkenny to town. We already saw in the pre-season competition they were very, very poor against Kilkenny. Now, maybe that won't have any relevance come then, but just maybe a confidence thing. Like, can they make sure they get to that stage of the final game, which probably will be that relegation playoff with Antrim, whereby their confidence is intact? And you could obviously say the same for Antrim.
Yeah, and the threat, Shane, is having got up to the Leinster Championship that they go straight back down. And all the good work, would say, that Tom Mullally has done to this point. And they're looking like they're going to be playing Division 1 hurling next year as well, at the minute anyway, flying high at the top of Division 2A. That threat that they would be back down in the McDonagh in 2025. And that's not like my own county's in the McDonagh. It's not like that's where we are at the minute. But when you get up, if they can stay there, Antrim have stayed there for a year, and I think it will stand to them potentially in this year's Leinster Championship, and particularly in that Carlow game. But it's crucial for Carlow that they're competitive in Leinster this year, or as competitive as they can be, and that they find a way to stay up somehow. Because even from a morale point of view, you're facing into 2025. Yes, there's a chance of silverware with, you know, been getting back to the Joe McDonagh again, or getting to a final again, but they want to be testing themselves at the highest level. So that's the threat, that they've gone up and that they'll go straight back down. And that's something I'm sure they'll be moving hell and high water to make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah, Travis Beeler says, opportunity for Carlow. It's probably the best team in their history. Mouse Cavan and Chris Nolan would make any top-tier team. Class players. Carlow public should get behind them. And Richard Hogan says, Carlow competitive against both Galway and Kilkenny the last time they were here. So look, maybe we were sort of putting lower expectations than we should on the Carlow hurling team. It's just some of the things that I've seen so far this year wouldn't ultimately fill me with huge optimism for their year. But it could be like anything, one of these things where they're timing it for the summer, trying to have everyone on the pitch at the right time and give a right rattle at the championship. Because ultimately, like, that's what you're going to be judged on, Michael. If you have a couple of ropey performances in the league, people will get over that. Yeah,
it was more in the Walsh Cup when Kilkenny kind of lay waste to them. Their league has been good so far, to be fair. And I said to you before, Tom Mullally kind of said that they can generally, with the size of their squad and what's available to them, they can generally only target one competition. But I think they've basically nearly everybody in the county that they want available to them. So they'll be hoping that they can carry league form into championship. I don't think we're being unrealistic, though. Like, themselves and Antrim are going to be under pressure. It's going to be, you'd imagine it's going to be an either or to see who's relegated. But listen, we probably had the same conversation last year with putting Westmeath and Antrim into that conversation, and Wexford nearly ended up getting relegated. So you never know.
Yeah, okay, final thing, that we've the music going there, so we're heading out the gap. Who's your goat of the week?
My goat of the week, I was down at that Cork game, and I thought, just again, I give great stock to a player playing well when his team aren't necessarily motoring, and Brian O'Driscoll was brilliant. Not the Brian O'Driscoll, the other one, the bald-headed Brian O'Driscoll. He was brilliant. He kicked 2 points. He was their only scorer in the first quarter, and he nearly lobbed the keeper, that one that went over the bar. He ended up with 3 points. Thought he had a big game and was one of the key drivers in helping Cork turn things around. So goat of the week for me would be Brian O'Driscoll, Carrigaline man.
I'd give it to Brian Fenton. Just another complete, composed performance from him with some brilliant scores in the midst. But okay, that's it. A reminder, we're brought to you by OurGAme.com. Use the promo code OurGAme and you'll get 15% off. Michael, we'll chat to you later in the week.
Cheers, Shadow.